Hi friends, and welcome to the 1840 podcast, where each month we explore a different topic balancing modern sensibilities with traditional sensitivities to give you new approaches to timeless Jewish ideas. I'm your host, David Mittleman, and this month we're exploring intergenerational divergence. Thank you so much to our series sponsors once again, our dearest friends, Danny and Sarla Turkel. I'm so grateful for your support and friendship over all these years. This episode is sponsored by the incredible organization Osei Chayil, which we will be learning much more about. Osei Chayil, you can learn more about their work on their website, oseichayil.org, Oseychail, a nonprofit organization serving lone soldiers from Haredi and Hasidic homes who are serving in the IDF. This podcast is part of a larger exploration of those big, juicy Jewish ideas, so be sure to check out 1840.org. That's 18forty.org, 1840.org, where you can find articles, videos, recommended readings, and weekly emails. Every year we come back to the topic of intergenerational divergence, how our ideological differences, our experiential differences can sometimes erode or challenge the family unit of how we are together and how we stick together as a family, particularly as we come together as a family before Passover is always a good time to reflect on those issues that really challenge the familial nature of the Jewish people. And since October 7th, I have been wondering how we can explore this specifically from an Israel angle, which is so much of what has informed and shaped our podcast the last few months. And there is one topic that sadly is roiling and threatens to kind of upend a lot of the sense of peoplehood and family nature of the Jewish people. And that very central issue, which is being covered by mainstream media outlets, think tanks, policy groups, is of course the issue of drafting Haredim, which includes people from the yeshiva world and from the Hasidic world, into the army. This is one of the most third-rail topics that really exist in the Jewish community, and it's with a great deal of sensitivity and thoughtfulness that I would like to explore one very small aspect of this debate, particularly how it affects families. The reason why I broke off such a small slice is really for two reasons. Number one, I don't feel comfortable as an American sitting in Teaneck who does not serve in the Israeli army protecting people to pontificate or act with any sort of superiority to those families who do live in Israel but choose not to send their children into the army. While I may disagree with the ideology that contributes to that communal formulation and formation, I don't think I have any claim, any sense of right, because the state of Israel is very much a part of my life, is very much protecting and representative of the Jewish people, and I am just as guilty, and I think all Americans are just as guilty as people who live in Israel yet choose not to send their children into the army. We could quibble over who's more guilty or who's less guilty, but this much I know on a very personal level is that I do not have the experience or commitment to lecture parents who are not sending their kids into the army on how I think that is wrong or how I think that is not the way to continue the state of Israel and all the other hosts of ideological reasons why this is absolutely necessary, because ultimately I have not served in the IDF and I have not sent any of my children to the IDF, though it would obviously be one of the great privileges of my life. But given the narrative trajectory of where I am living in Teaneck, I don't want to do that, and that's not how I wanted to approach this issue. Instead, in a similar way in how we've approached other major ideological hurdles for the Jewish community, sometimes I think the easiest way to explore is not kind of this top-down first principles, let's figure out what the halacha mandates, let's figure out Jewish law, let's figure out how to get all the institutions on board. I have always believed that the number one fulcrum of momentum within the Jewish community is not the institutions, it's not correcting all of the ideology, it's addressing and talking to the family unit, talking to children, talking to parents, and sharing their experiences and how it resonates or how it challenges. And that's exactly what I plan on doing here. This is not going to be an overview of the issue of Haredi participation in the IDF. There are many resources and places to look about that. This is going to be a very narrowly constructed window into the lives of those families and those individuals, children and parents alike, who have made this incredible sacrifice in protecting Amcha Amcha Yisrael, Be'eretz Yisrael, the Jewish people in the land of Israel. And the toll that this takes, the toll that this can take on families, the toll that it can take on parents, and also highlighting in an upcoming episode, those parents and those families who kind of rise to the occasion and have the capacity, even given their ideological commitments, but they are constructed in a way that allows their children, whose decisions they may not have approved of or they may not have encouraged, but able to look at them with broad, flexible eyes and ensure that those decisions do not break what I think is the holy of holies of Jewish life, which of course is the family. So instead of talking about policy, as we so often do on 1840, I want this to be a conversation about family. A while ago, when we did an episode on the rally in Washington in support of Israel, I spoke about a term that emerged from the fact that many in the American Jewish community chose not to participate, and some of the debates around the participation of our community in that rally. The term that I used that many felt in that moment who came from communities that chose not to encourage their members to join in support of Israel at the rally, the language that I used was hashkafically homeless. That there are moments in times where hashkafa, which is the Hebrew word meaning religious worldview, can leave some feeling homeless. That our religious worldview, if it is constructed too narrowly or without enough slack, or it's not resilient or flexible enough, can leave us looking around and saying, where do I belong in this community? This is an episode in many ways of people who have been left in a very real way hashkafically homeless, who have been left without a clear path forward. Some of this has healed. Some of these people who we're hearing from are still in this place of difficulty. But the term that I wanted to introduce in this episode is not hashkafic homelessness, but hashkafic consequences. That there are consequences to our religious worldviews, very real consequences. And what I am pushing for, and the reason why I'm raising this, is not to ask anybody to immediately change on a dime their religious worldview, but to ensure that the religious ideologies that we construct for ourselves are built in a way that is resilient enough, that isn't strong enough to include all those within our immediate family. To have a religious worldview whose hashkafic consequences do not, God forbid, leave anyone homeless, leave anyone without the actual unit of family that is so nourishing, not only for our material lives, but almost more importantly for our spiritual lives. It is nearly impossible to be spiritually successful in life without a healthy relationship with the previous generation. I'm not saying it's entirely impossible, but it is nearly impossible. That doesn't mean that we need to be the same as the previous generation, as our parents, but it does mean that we have to make sure that we do not spend the rest of our lives mending the wounds from the hashkafic consequences that we may have been raised up within, and that our religious worldview has very real consequences on others in our family and our lives, and that we should make sure that the way that we speak, the way that our children hear us speak, whether it's the way that we speak about soldiers who are protecting the Jewish people in the land of Israel, whether it's the way that we speak about people who have dedicated their lives to studying Torah, even if it was done so in a way that may not be a part of the religious idealism that we encourage. But there are always hashkafic consequences to the way that we speak about our religious commitments, and that we should make sure that we do not develop a worldview that has unintended hashkafic consequences that, God forbid, first and foremost, ever alienate or erode the familiar relationships that have bound together and kept the Jewish people resilient and alive through all of these generations. And secondly, we can sometimes have unintended hashkafic consequences when we talk with too much cynicism, when we talk with too much anger. What our children can overhear us speaking is that we're embarrassed by the Jewish people, we don't have faith in the Jewish people, and that we have to make sure that we do not allow our own cynicism around our very, very real issues, but that cynicism should never metastasize and erode those familial bonds that hold us together. This episode would never have happened without the partnership of an incredible organization called Osei Chayil. I want to tell you a little bit about Osei Chayil. It was founded in 2006 by someone really remarkable who I spoke with. We tried to get on. His English was not really strong enough to include directly in the episode, but somebody named Aaron Granot. Aaron Granot was raised in a Hasidic home. His father was a Ger Chassid, but in those years, it was very unusual. It wasn't as divided as we have it today. His father, who was a Ger Chassid, fought with the Lehi and was one of the instrumental founders in the building of the country. And when I was looking to have windows to explore some of the ideological divides that surround drafting into the Israeli army and the challenges that that poses on so many families, I was looking for someone who really understands what is going on within the Haredi and Hasidic world in Israel. And I found this person, Aaron Granot, who's absolutely remarkable. He has dedicated his life through Osei Chayil of anybody who comes from a home that has kicked them out, has severed ties, does not open up their home because of these hashkafic consequences that sometimes come out when people do something which is so incredibly noble, which is deciding to protect the Jewish people and serve in the IDF. But for many families, and we know this is true, that is too much for them. There is a lot of ideological baggage that is being carried in the state of Israel. And unfortunately, not everyone is ready to set down their ideological baggage or even sort through it and reflect upon it. But the momentum of those differences, which began even before the founding of the state of Israel and continued today, where really only members of the secular and religious Zionist community serve in the IDF and members of Hasidic and Haredi community by and large do not, can be a very real wedge within families. And Osei Chayil is an organization that I just found out about this year. I really need to thank Rav Judah Michel. He's the first person who mentioned this person, Aaron Granot, to me, and we connected through Gabi Kraus, who was really incredible setting up this entire episode, connecting me to soldiers who came from Haredi or Hasidic homes, but because of these decisions or things that preceded it, they were no longer welcome in their homes. And this organization sets up apartments, sets up and connects them to adoptive families, one of which we'll hear from in this episode, who are able to provide that infrastructure, that nourishing infrastructure, to ensure that nobody who makes a decision to protect the Jewish people, to protect the ultimate collective family of the Jewish people, should be left themselves without a family of their own. And that is why the work of Aaron Granot and Gabi Kraus and this organization, Osei Chayil, struck a nerve with me, and I wanted to really highlight some of the struggles that these people are going through, some of the chesed, the extraordinary acts of kindness and graciousness of people who open up their own lives and their own family to people who don't have them from their own biological family. I wanted to really explore the importance of this work. First and foremost, because this organization needs our support, but this isn't me fundraising for another organization. This is me presenting a very real issue that divides families and is now dividing the Jewish people and pushing us to think in ways, each in our own way, about the way that we talk about soldiers, the way that we talk about religious education, the way that rabbanim, rabbis in our lives may talk about this, and to ensure that we support the people who are building the widest tents, who are creating a hashkafa, a religious ideology, as strong and as passionate as that can and should be, that does not, God forbid, leave anybody both literally or figuratively homeless. And each of us know people within our orbit, and maybe it's us ourselves to speak with more sensitivity, to realize there are real hashkafic consequences to our worldviews, and that we should ensure that the way that we formulate our religious universe has a place for everybody, dignity for everybody, a place where people can enter, a place where people can even maybe set up camp right outside the edifices that we build, but nobody should be left without a family. And there's a lot that needs to change in this, and I'm not recommending or getting involved in any of the actual policy changes that are being debated right now in the Knesset. But what I am kind of pleading for, because this is such a central part of the work of 1840 and it's coming from a deeply personal place, because I've seen the way that religious ideology can divide, but I've also seen it in remarkable ways, the way that it can connect and ensure generations hold together, as difficult as that may be. And I think in this moment, in this hour, what we need to do is open our hearts and minds to some of these very challenging stories. They are not always easy stories. And think how we in our own individual lives can ensure that we have the edifices and structures, as passionate as our religious ideology should be, it should never come at the expense of the familial unit. And to coach people to speak and treat one another with that sensitivity, that strategic sensitivity, that balancing, as we always say in the opening of our episodes, modern sensibilities with traditional sensitivities, both can exist together. And it's really thanks to the work of Osei Chayil that we have access to these incredible stories. And without further ado, I would like to introduce introduce our first conversation. And just to note, what is so sad about this is that nearly all of the soldiers have chosen to come on anonymously because their family units remain so fragile and so vulnerable, and they don't want to make it any worse. So we almost always use pseudonyms for anybody who we are speaking with. And hopefully, when we revisit this conversation, and this isn't the only episode that we have on it, we're also talking to some incredible parents and families on this issue. But for right now, this is a difficult episode. That's the honest truth. It is a difficult episode. And we need to think about what we can do in the next 12 months, that God willing, when we come back to Intergenerational Divergence next year, there are stories of more strong families, more people who are coming together who have weathered this ideological issue with that graciousness and capacity, that we should have a line around the block of families who have learned to navigate this in extraordinary ways, as difficult as this issue may be. And it is difficult and it is hard, because this is almost in some ways the ultimate intergenerational divergence. The way previous generations in the Haredi and yeshiva world have considered and approached this issue is very different than the world that we live in now post October 7th. There is almost a intergenerational divergence in what the needs of the state of Israel and what the army are, and to open ourselves up to construct a world where the Jewish people in the land of Israel have all of their security needs met, and every family in the state of Israel is able to navigate this issue, this highly, highly sensitive issue, but with the help of heaven, with siyata d'shmaya, to be able to navigate it in a way that first and foremost, the ultimate family, the mishpachas Yehudi, the collective family of the Jewish people, and every individual family should emerge from this question even stronger, even more honest, even more decent, and more generous with one another. So without further ado, here is our first conversation with a beneficiary of the work of Osei Chayil, who fought valiantly in the IDF, to hear about how he navigated coming from a Hasidish home. I want to begin by really going back to your upbringing and your childhood. When you were growing up, what was your community life, and what did you feel the expectations were on you growing up as a boy?
So I grew up in a Breslov community in Beit Shemesh, in a Haredi, or I believe in English it's called ultra-Orthodox community. And like the expectations from the kids there to what we call walk the line, to continue in the same growing up way that we were raised, and basically to continue in probably be more like Avrech Kollel, to study, to be in the yeshiva, and a little bit less to, like to work outside the community, outside the Haredi life, or especially to go to the military. That's not part of what we were raised.
So what age were you when you realized that plan was not working out for you? And was that the same time that your parents realized?
That's a good question. If I could point out a specific age, I would say it would be 16. I showed up to my parents. I told them, like, hey, I'm not getting in the yeshiva, like I understand it's important to learn Torah. I believe in God, but you understand that you're going to want to make a living for your family one day, and respectful for a living, like a good job. And to do that, it's just not enough. You can't grow up in the Torah. That's all what and also make a switch in one day. You have to prepare yourself for that. So I told it to my parents. They were acceptable. They put me into a yeshiva that was half Dati Leumi, half Haredi, which they did have a bagrut, which I really appreciated them for doing so.
The bagrut, just for our listeners, is like the high school national testing. Well, if you grew up in the New York area, it's called the Regents. It's like the national testing to get a high school diploma.
Well said. That's what it is. And at the age of 18, I realized that I'm probably going to join the military. It's the way to connect into the rest of the Israeli nation, to the Chilonim, to be part of we call it Olam HaMaaseh, the actual word where you actually work to make a living. And I decided before that to go to yeshiva, to litchazek, to strengthen my Yiddishkeit, because I was still afraid that I might lose it in the military with non-religious soldiers. So I was in a Litvish yeshiva for another year, drafted at age 19, and I was there as a sergeant, an NCO, in the infantry combat brigade. When I finished that, I was basically out of the military and I went back into working. I started working as a builder, a little bit security as a side hustle.
And tell me a little bit about your relationship with your parents. Did it remain strong even after you decided to join the military?
So I would definitely say it weakened a little bit. At the time, also, my parents were getting divorced and my mother didn't want to deal with another breakup. So she kind of put it underneath the table, as we say. And eventually, when she got remarried, she remarried a really super religious guy, and he was not happy at all. told that there was a soldier that was coming home on the weekends, and he basically told her like either him or me. So my mother came up to me like one day after I came back from a really hard week in the military, and she tells me like it's either you or him, and I'm half gonna choose him. I think you're too old for this house, and please find a different place.
That's fairly heartbreaking to hear, and I'm sorry that you went through that. Are you still in contact with your mother and with your father?
It took me a while, but about 2 years ago, I got back into contact with him. With my father, I kind of remained in contact with him all the way through. He already left the house at the point. He was living in the United States when I was kicked out of the house and all the way through my military service. With my mother, I came back to contact about 2 years ago.
Tell me a little bit about the work of Osei Chayil and what they did for you during this transitory period in your life.
So what Osei Chayil does is they basically take people that don't have a house, specifically from a Haredi background, and they provide them with all the comfort and warmness of the home, just like anyone else would get in their natural home. And the best way they do it is they have a really good combination of both people that come from the Haredi community, and also they provide, each one has like a house in the village where we were at in Kiryat Arba that would also follow and mentor the soldiers, the Haredi soldiers, through the process of the military. Since a lot of us were not used to dealing with people outside of that community, specifically non-religious soldiers, or even the entire process of how the military works. Like, we just don't have that background.
There must be so much pain having grown up in a community and then kind of charting your own path. Do you still feel a lot of anger to the Haredi community in Israel, or have you found a way to make peace with that?
When I look at individual people in the Haredi community, there's absolutely no anger at all. I don't think they're bad people. They're very nice people, for the fact. The only problem that I have is with the leadership that encourages people not to learn melachot chol, like outside studies, what you probably call normal studies.
Secular studies.
Secular studies, yeah. That's the problem that I have with the leadership.
Do you have any contacts aside from family of friends or even mentors who from the yeshivas or people who you met growing up who you're still in touch with?
Not today.
Wow, that is fairly heartbreaking. Are you able to talk about your pain and the pain of the way she related to you with your own mother right now, or is that something that you stay away from?
We managed to talk about it, like about 2 years ago when we started our connection. We both cried. It was very hard. But I think as of today, like, she already understands what I went through. I understand like what I went for her, like the heartbreaking. She expected one thing from me and I went to a different side. So we both kind of understand each other, and I'm happy we got to that place.
And I'm just curious, in that conversation you had with your mother, who started that conversation? Was that you or was that her?
It was her.
As she came to you, was she ever able to apologize for making that choice?
She never said it out front, but I'm sure she's deeply sorry inside.
And let me ask you a little bit about your current relationship with Yiddishkeit, with Judaism. It's hard, somebody who's had a story like you, changing different communities, feel like you've been abandoned in your own home. Are you able to have in any way a healthy relationship with Judaism itself?
So the founder of Osei Chayil, Aaron Granot, I studied Chavruta with him every day, and we discussed this topic a lot.
You still learn with him every day now?
Every day, yeah.
That is so...
Yeah.
I'm so curious, what do you study, or are you more freelance? You just kind of talk about whatever's on your mind?
Currently, we're studying Mesilat Yesharim. In the past, we finished Mishnayot together. We finished a book called Plinei Halacha. It's been going on since I moved to the US, yeah.
That is absolutely beautiful. And tell me, in those conversations, what is the reminder, what is the work that you feel you still have to do to develop a healthy relationship with Yiddishkeit, even after going through so much of a difficult story that you've been through? What's the work that you have to do that allows you to make peace with it?
It was a very simple understanding that just like fell onto me one day, that there's not a single person that represents Yiddishkeit, or God for that matter. And as far as I believe, it's a very dangerous thing to look at someone and completely rely on him for your connection with God. So what I took from that is, it's true that there might be people that don't represent God for me, but God is so big, Judaism is so big, there's so much paths you could take towards God that you don't have to be stuck on one of them. And that's our obligation as Jews, to always look for the right thing for us.
I appreciate that. Tell me a little bit about your relationship to kind of your adopted family, so to speak, that Osei Chayil connected you with, and how they related to you. Were they Dati? Were they Haredi? And what exactly did that family provide for you?
They were Dati Lomi. As far as what they provided, everything that a family can provide. a place, a room, food, a good bed that was ready whenever you came back from the military, mentorship throughout the army, like how to deal with officers, how to deal with the military structure, etc. It was just like, it literally felt like a home. And they never, like, even when I would do something wrong to them, it felt like I'm doing something wrong towards my family. Like, that's how they treated me, like a son, literally. Like, they would give me the car, whatever their kids would get, I would get the same.
It's incredibly remarkable work, and I think it's a testament not only to the work of Osei Chayil, but a testament to the generosity of the Jewish people, that when one family does not have capacity to provide you the love that you very much deserve and need, to know that there is another family among the Jewish people who are going to open up their hearts and home to you is something that is incredibly moving. And I so admire your continued search and engagement with Yiddishkeit and kind of not giving up on Judaism, even when you feel that so many gave up on you in your own story. So thank you so much for speaking with me today.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Thanks for hosting.
The hashkafic consequences are very real. It is hard to deny that not all of the familial breakdown comes solely from the decision of a soldier to join the IDF. Obviously, there are things that predetermine that of why the child chose to take a very different path than his parents, but these are soldiers who risked their lives to defend the state of Israel. He's not the only soldier that we spoke with. I want to share another conversation, a tough conversation, about somebody who also grew up in a Hasidic home and how they navigated that upbringing and eventually joined the IDF. It is our absolute privilege and pleasure to introduce, we're going to use a little bit of a nickname, to introduce our friend Yehoshua. Josh, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi.
I wanted to begin with your own childhood. Tell me a little bit about the type of world you were raised in, the type of family and home you were brought up in, and what was supposed to be your plan A.
So basically, I grew up in Mea Shearim, in a ultra-Orthodox community.
Haredi, Hasidish or Yeshivish?
No, it's more like Hasidish, Toldot Aaron, if you know.
Yes, I do know.
Toldot Aaron. So
sure.
I grew up in Toldot Aaron, and there they teach you, like when you go in school, they teach you to be a rabbi and learn Torah all day and not have any connection to anything about the government. Of course, not about the army and anything about, just teach you to be a rabbi and a holy man for the rest of your life.
Torah.
Yes, it's like very, very strong, like Torah and Tefillah and Hasidus, and they're also very against the government and against the army. So like if a soldier comes in, they kick him out, they don't talk to him and whatever. So that was my plan A, that I was planning to be a chosid of the rabbi and just be his chosid for the rest of my life, get married, have 20 children. I don't know how much children they have there.
Yeah.
And that was my plan. That was what I wanted to do, and that's what I was growing up to do.
And if I were to ask you as a child, you knew you were Israeli. Did you know what the Israeli flag looked like as a kid?
Yes, of course. But I knew Lag BaOmer, we used to burn the flag. We used to show up to cars and pick the flags of the cars.
As a kid, did you know what Hatikva was? Did you know some of the songs?
No, nothing.
No, nothing.
I hear there and here, like I didn't learn about it. I just people talking and stuff like that. So that's how I knew that they have something named Hatikva. I didn't know the words, of course not the song, anything about it. I just know the government is bad, the government is evil, and you need to pray to God that the government shall fall.
I see you in uniform. Our listeners can't see that, but I see you, wearing the uniform of Tzahal. So obviously plan A did not materialize. What's your earliest memory of realizing that the path that you were supposed to develop on is not going to work?
When I was around like 18, then I decided I'm very a curious guy. I'm not a person you tell him to do things and he does it without asking questions and without knowing what's the reason he's doing stuff. So every time someone told me to do something, I was asking questions all the time. And then always when it started to become questions about the government and stuff, so people are not answering questions, just saying don't talk about it, it's evil, don't hear about it and whatever. And in the time when I was like 18, so I was like more curious about it. I was checking it out and I was talking with more people, and then I figured out about the army and what's his job, what he's doing. And slowly I just decided, it took me time, it took me like a year and a half for me to decide that I want to really join the army and whatever. But I stopped like learning in the yeshiva all the time because I was telling myself that's not what I'm planning to do in my life. I'm not planning to be a rabbi sitting and learning Torah all day. And then I learned about the army and about the government, and understanding that the army is the shliach of God to keep Jewish people in Israel safe. So when I understand that, and I wanted to also develop myself in more ways, not only learning Torah, I want to know how to calculate stuff. Now I'm an officer, so I have a company under me. So I know how to handle a company. I want to know more stuff besides learning Torah all day. And then I decided to join the army.
It sounds like your questions were not about hashkafa or God. Is that not where your questions began? Your questions began by exploring what is the country that I am a part of? Meaning, a lot of times when people start asking questions in their teens, they're asking, why should I believe in God? Is that where your questions began, or your questions began by exploring what is the government and the country that I'm in?
It's more about why I'm calling myself religious, and I know that only I, in my way, is the I way. That's the religious way to be a religious person. And they have different people. They keep Shabbos, they kosher, and everything is very good, and they still call themselves religious. So someone is making a mistake. Maybe it's me, and maybe it's them, and maybe it's a different people. So I'm like trying to figure out what's the right way, what's the truth. Because the truth is only one way. It's not 150 ways. I was trying to figure out what's the real way. And then when I figured out about the army, and they're saying the army is bad, very bad, they don't really know what's the army. The people in Mea Shearim, they don't really know what it is. They just hear about it and say that it's bad, and that's it. And they know that they have units mixed boys and girls, and so that's bad. And they have units not keeping Shabbos. So, okay, so the whole army is a bad place. It's like antisemiyut, when Goyim, they say like all of the Jews were kippah and shtreimel and long payas. It doesn't make sense. It's just every person is different. Every person serves God in a different way. And for me, I just realized that being in the army is not a sin like I was growing up to think about. And exactly the opposite. I feel like a big schus to be in the army, and I really feel like, why someone else so make sure that my brothers and sisters and all of my friends so be safe when I'm gonna sit and learn Torah or work or whatever I'm gonna do. I was not planning to learn Torah all my life. I was planning maybe to work or something, when different people are giving their life for their own brothers and sisters to keep them safe.
For the Jewish people, for Amcha Yisrael, for sure.
So they're making sure the Jewish people are going to be safe. And why should I not be a part of that and make sure that people are staying safe? Why should I be the one sitting in the side and not doing anything? I once explained it to one of my friends that it's like when your little brother gets beaten up in the street, the first urge every person has is to go out yourself and make sure that he's stopping to get beaten up and make sure his brother is safe. That's the first urge of every person. The problem is that people don't look at Jewish people like real brothers. They look at them like, like people of the same religion. So that's the reason people don't feel such an urge to really keep safe the country and the Jewish people. Anyway, the army is not only an army, if you know, the army is not made only for the country. The Israeli army is made for the whole world, for every Jewish person all around the world. That's the reason the army is made. The army helps people all around the world when they need it. Of course, I can't talk about it in which type of ways, but really the army is made
to protect the Jewish people.
Yes, wherever they are. So basically, when I'm in the army, I feel like I'm keeping safe my own brothers and sisters. And the urge I get when someone beats up my own brother, that's the urge I have when I'm in the army and I'm making sure my brothers and sisters are keeping safe.
Let's continue in your story. You're asking these questions. You decide that you want to join. How did your parents react when they saw that you were charting this different path? Obviously, it's not why they chose to raise you in Mea Shearim. How did they react?
My parents reacted very, very sad. My parents are like crying for the first couple weeks. I tried very, very much. I'm not against the religion. I'm not against my parents. I love my parents. I love their religion. I love the army, and I love what I'm doing. I'm not angry at anyone. So when my parents were very sad about it and they started crying about it, and my brothers and sisters were also crying about it, so it's like very difficult because I needed to come home and like hide from them that I'm really planning to join the army. It was before I joined the army. I was not like I'm dressed now. I was not with the long payas and the kapilut, and they're very sad about it.
When did you decide to no longer wear payas and the lavush and the garments that are usually associated?
In the year and a half, I told you that it took me time to understand what I want to really be and what's true and what's not. So it took me time until I decided that I want to be in a specific way. You could see I'm not wearing a yarmulke, but I'm keeping Shabbos and I'm putting on tefillin.
Wow.
I'm very, I believe in God. I very believe in God. I keep kosher. I keep Shabbos how much I could. In the army, sometimes you can't keep Shabbos because the terrorists, they don't sleep on Shabbos.
Yeah.
Exactly. exactly the opposite.
They don't keep Shabbos, so you can't keep Shabbos. Yeah.
Yes. So a lot of stuff happens, and my religion is in my way, and I see the army as a religious thing to join the army and be in the army.
Were you able to make peace with your parents? They react and they're crying, and obviously that's very painful. Did you understand why they were crying?
Of course. Imagine yourself, you have a child, you're growing him up to be a good person, and one day he decides to be a head of a crime organization. Would you not cry?
Yeah.
If you don't know that the army is not a crime organization and it's a good organization keeping Jewish people alive, so you don't look at it in that way. But they saw the army as a place that if I go there, I'm probably going to become a anti-Jewish and everything, like everything against God and against everything. And then took time for them. I'm already like 4.5 years in the army, and the last like 2 years, my parents are like understanding the situation and they're like getting used to it. So they're not really very sad, and I come visit them from time to time, like once in a couple months.
Are you able to wear your uniform when you visit them?
And no, that's not. I can't wear my uniform because they live in Mea Shearim, in a place where I can't go there with my uniform. They're gonna throw at me rocks or eggs or whatever. But I come there like in the middle of the night, like 1 or 2 in the morning, and then I show up and I say, hello, I love my parents. I'm not against them, but I'm just trying to, we should both go in the same way and both like understand each other.
And I want to talk more about that because I'm really moved by your ability to not be angry. You have all of the reasons to be very angry and frustrated and cynical about Yiddishkeit, about your parents, and you don't seem to be. You seem to have a real appreciation. Everyone has limitations of what they're able to understand. How do you look at the community that you're protecting? You protect Mea Shearim. You protect the Jews that live there, yet, obviously they don't show you the appreciation that you rightfully deserve. How are you able to sacrifice or be willing to sacrifice your own life, put yourself in danger to protect community that is not showing you that appreciation?
I really, really don't think about it in that way, like you're saying it. I look at Jews as Jews. It's brothers and sisters who decide in their own ways what to be. I have, by my parents' house, brothers and sisters are very religious, and I appreciate them and I love them the same as I love my different brother, what is not really religious today. He's like kind of like me. I mean, in between, like he doesn't believe in God and doesn't eat kosher and eats like shrimps and he's angry at God and whatever. And I love both of them the same. So when I look at Jewish people, I understand. I used to be ultra-Orthodox. I used to be in Tolot Aaron. I know what they think about. I know what they know. You know stuff they don't know, and they know stuff you don't know. And I was in both places, so I know what they think about it. So I don't look at them like, oh, ultra-Orthodox, bad people. No, I understand them. I wish I could just sit down with them and explain to them what I understand in all of these years. I'm not going to do it because they're never going to talk with me because I don't look religious. But I'm not angry at them because I know what they think. I know what they believe in, and I know what they want to do in their life. When I go on the street and they throw rocks at me, I understand them. I'm not angry at them. I was also a child. I also threw rocks at soldiers. I also threw eggs at policemen. I also go to protest all the time. I did it because I didn't know better. I didn't know anything. I didn't know a lot of stuff. And I believed in stuff. I remember when I left, I saw a bottle of Coke. You know Coca-Cola?
Yeah, of course, betach.
So I see a bottle of Coke. A religious person sees a bottle of Coke. He sees it in a certain way. He sees it as a drink, what's Echsher Rav Landau. Better not drink it because then it's ta'avot. And if you go after your ta'avot, you make a avera. And it has gazoz. When you're not religious and you know more stuff, so you look at Coke in a different way. I look at Coke today like too much sugar, don't drink it. But drink it if you ate something full of oil, so your stomach hurts you, so you drink a cup of Coke and then it settles down your stomach. So you understand that like a little child sees a truck first time and an older person sees a truck. Every person sees it in a different way. So that's the reason I'm not angry at them. Exactly the opposite. The Jews, I'll tell you something. When I was in the army in the beginning, like in the first year, I used to be a truck driver before I joined the combat unit. And then when I was in a truck driver, I had friends, Bedouin, Arabs, really Arabs. And I used to work with them all the time. And then one day, one of the Arabs, the Bedouin, is like telling me, you know, that Arab there, he has blue eyes. People talk about him that he's Jewish. I said, what? How could he be Jewish? And then I was like figuring it out and going to talk with him. And then I figure out that Bedouin, that Arab, his mother 40 years ago got married with an Arab, different Bedouin, and he's the child. So basically he's Jewish. The moment he told me he's Jewish, I got a big ahava, and I was so happy for him that he's Jewish that I feel like a connection to him because he's Jewish. Even he's Arab. He barely speaks Hebrew. He speaks only Arabic. He prays to Muhammad and whatever. He's Jewish. I feel a different connection. I feel happy to keep him safe.
You feel a sense of responsibility.
So the same thing with ultra-Orthodox.
In your ongoing relationship with your parents, and even more specifically, your siblings, do you talk about your development, your change views, or you keep it light, stay away from the heavy topics? And specifically, after October 7th, have the conversations with your family changed at all? Is there maybe a little bit more appreciation for the role that you are playing in keeping the Jewish people safe? Because there's no questioning, even in a Haredi or a Hasidish or Litvisha old school community, they say Tehillim for the Jewish people in danger. Have you noticed a change in the way that you've been speaking to your parents and siblings post October 7th?
They see October 7th different than what you see and I see October 7th. So they don't see October 7th as like a bad thing happened to the Jewish people, and because of that, we need to join the army and fight back. They see October 7th as our sins made God angry, and God made October 7th to happen, and that's the reason we need to pray harder and learn better. So they don't really believe that the army is that's the maybe shlichim of God, because God decided for them to be the shlichim, but it doesn't make them believe that the army is a better place and it's more necessary. They don't believe the army is necessary. They believe God is necessary. Only God. Like, put myself in God's hands and God could do with me whatever he wants. I never pick up the big topics and I never talk with them about the army and what to do, what I believe in and stuff like that, because I want to be like in a natural, when I talk with them, I want to be in a natural situation because I don't want to fight with them. The second year, they didn't talk with me like for a year, and then they started talking with me about the topics and we're like fighting all the time, and then I just decided natural, not talk about it, I'm your son, you're my father, that's it. Not army, no, doesn't care what. They're not talking to me about religion, I'm not talking with them about army. So it's like a win-win situation.
And it's been much better since then.
Yes, of course, it's much better. I talk with them from time to time. I try call them. They don't really have messages. They have kosher phones. They don't have internet and whatever. So I try call them from time to time. Once a couple months, I try also see them. That's basically my relationship with my parents.
Have you seen any changes post October 7th? I mean, I'm curious if you have. No, you have not in the community that you came from.
I also understand them. No, of course not. The reason why the Holocaust came, including to them, it's not because Jewish people were not trained to be fighters. Including to them, it's because our sins. We sinned. God decided to keep us pure. The way for him to keep us pure is to make a Holocaust. And the person God decided to make the Holocaust is Hitler. But the main being what made the Holocaust and made October 7th is God. God is the one who decided to make it, and he made it for his reasons or for our sins. Now, good people died. A lot of Jews, very early Jewish Jews died. It was not only bad people, but they see it as a way that God decided to take his sacrifice. And that's the reason I don't even believe they're going to change their mind about it, because they see things different. They don't see things like we see them.
Same Coke bottle, but a different look. It sounds like you just told me you put on tefillin, you chew your best to keep Shabbos. I'm curious about your memories of your upbringing. You seem to have almost a healthy relationship with the world that you came from. You understand their own limitations. Do you have specific memories from your childhood that you look back fondly on, that you still find nourishing and inspiring from the way you were raised?
I see stuff that I was raised, specific parts that I'm happy that I was raised in that way. And I see different stuff that I'm sad, like I'm not happy that I was raised like that.
Give me some examples of the happy stuff.
Maybe not knowing so much. Maybe just living in a bubble and just knowing about specific stuff. People are happy when they don't know about stuff. People eat media for breakfast and dinner all the time, and they know about stuff and they get sad about it. Imagine yourself sitting at home and no radio or no television and know nothing, and you don't know what's happening anywhere. And only when someone shows up to you and screams at you, so you know about it. So you're happier. You're a lot better. You feel a lot better. I think one of the things I kind of miss is not knowing so much. I was very curious person, child. I was like always wanted to know everything about everything all the time. And it makes you think about stuff more and want more stuff. And you're not happy about anything because like I go to a slide and I enjoy the slide and then I see a picture of a bigger slide. So I want the bigger slide and I'm never going to enjoy the slide I'm now on because I really know about the bigger slide. And that's the same way in everything. Like I didn't know about different drinks what are not Eda Haredis. So I was happy with the drinks I had. Today, I need to ask, like, I know about so much types of foods and drinks and that. So I'm not really happy in the stuff I have. So that's something I kind of miss because I miss being happy.
That is a profound answer and something that I think people don't always consider. And I'm curious, in the Army, you have a much deeper and more religious background in the Army. Do you ever feel a sense of responsibility or a sense, you mentioned it before, almost a sense of sadness that there are people growing up in Israel who on the other side of the extreme who you meet, who know very little about Yiddishkeit and Judaism and almost the nature of the people that they're trying to protect? And do you ever feel a sense of responsibility to get more people in the center who know a little bit about Yiddishkeit and are also willing to defend it?
I'll tell you, I see things different. Exactly the opposite. Because they don't know about stuff and they don't know about Yiddishkeit, so when they sin, so they don't make God angry. So God is happy with them, whatever they do, even they make the biggest sins, because no one didn't never teach them to not eat unkosher stuff. So whatever they eat and whatever they sin, they never really sin. So exactly the opposite. I don't see any responsibility to teach them stuff. If they're not going to make me tell people about religion, I'm not talking with anyone about religion. I believe in God. I believe in religion. I want people to not do things against God and against His will. So when I see someone not religious and he doesn't know even God exists, he grew up in a situation about, whatever they teach them, I'm happy for them that they don't know, and when they sin, they don't really sin. So they're really holy people, and when Chaz v'Sholem, the soldiers when they die, and I'll tell you, like when I said the people in the Nova, what I think, the people in the Nova who died, and then Simchas Torah, then people are dancing with the Sefer Torah, they're dancing for a statue of Buddha in the middle of a desert, mixed dancing and goyish songs and whatever. They never sinned. They never knew it's bad. Exactly the opposite. That was the way for them to express themselves. And I believe every single one of them was a bigger tzaddik than me, of course, because I know about Judaism, because I grew up in it. So they're like one by one, the biggest tzaddikim in the door, and I wish I could be like them. Chaz v'Sholem, I'm not planning to die like them, but I'm saying,
no, I understand what you're saying. I understand.
So I don't feel responsible.
What gives you the strength or the inspiration to still have any connection to Yiddishkeit at this point? You're no longer in the community that you grew up with and forged that original connection that you had to Yiddishkeit. You're in a very different world. It would almost, in my mind, I would understand, no one would criticize or blame you if you just cut off all ties together with Yiddishkeit. And I'm curious, what continues to inspire you that you even make an effort? You do your best. And what continues to give you that strength to remain engaged in your own way, obviously, with Yiddishkeit?
Not being a little kid what gets angry at a stick when the stick kicks him. I think it's being stupid to get angry at all of the religious ultra-Orthodox people because some of them were bad to you. It's childish, and it's a waste of time to just use my energy to just go be angry at people and fight and be against people. I think it's opposite. And someone wants to be, how do you say chiloni in English?
Secular. Yeah, you could say chiloni. Okay. We know that word. Don't worry.
If someone wants to be chiloni, chiloni is supposed to be a person what is free of mitzvahs and Torah and nothing. No one is not telling him what to do. So if I want to be real chiloni, I can't really make things against Judaism because then I'm not chiloni. I'm a slave of against Judaism. I'm trying to be calm. I'm trying to not fight anyone. I'm trying to be healthy and not hurt my feelings. I'm trying to be a good person and I'm not trying to fight anyone. I mean, it's childish to fight all the time because then you're not really chiloni. You're just going in a deeper pit of fighting people and doing like, oh, now it's Shabbos, so I must go Mechal Shabbos. Okay, let's find a light to turn on. I think it's childish or stupid.
It's immature.
It's immature.
The point that you're making, it's quite profound, where if you really want to, so to speak, free yourself, and all you're doing in your life is to spite where you came from, to get back at where you came from, then you haven't really found yourself and you haven't really tasted freedom.
Exactly.
And speaking to you, who is really trying to find a path for yourself yourself and not discard what nourishes you if it gives you nourishment and you find it moving and it's a part of who you are and it's a part of your beliefs, and allow yourself to hang on to that shard even after you've let go of so much. Frankly, it is quite inspiring, and I am so grateful to speak to you today, and specifically for your service. I'm speaking to someone who's defending the Jewish people, Amcha Yisrael, Be'eretz Yisrael. Yehoshua, Josh, I am so grateful and appreciative for taking the time to speak today.
You're welcome. I'm also appreciating for you to listen and whatever.
One of the most painful stories and one of the most incredible acts of chesed that is facilitated by Osei Chayil is the fact that after some of these soldiers join the IDF, they no longer are able to have normal relationships with their own family. And what Osei Chayil does, because they understand the importance of having family and how nourishing that structure and a place to come home and do laundry, etc., is, they connect soldiers from Haredi backgrounds to, so to speak, adoptive families. You know, in some communities, they call this our chosen family. A family that's there and opens up their hearts and homes to people who don't have that regular, healthy, normal familial relationships. And at the beginning of October 7th, there was one incredible soldier named David Mittleman, who unfortunately in the very beginning of October 7th was killed in the line of battle. And he was a corporal in the Israeli army. And David Mittleman, Hashem yikkom, damo, had an adoptive family named Ruzievich. And Yael Ruzievich took the time out to talk a little bit about what it means to be an adoptive family, how the adoptive families interact and correspond with the actual family of the children. We're not looking, and this is so important to emphasize, adoptive families should never look to replace or push aside real family, but help build that bridge back to be able to have the capacity and love to really embrace that child, which is everything that Yael Ruzievich has done. And they did really incredible work when David, Hashem yikkom, damo, was killed for his funeral. And it is really an incredible privilege to speak to the adoptive family, the chosen family of David Mittleman, Hashem yikkom, damo. Here is our conversation with Yael Ruzievich. Maybe you could begin by explaining to me, what does it mean to be an adoptive family for Osei Chayil? How did they find you, and what exactly do you offer these soldiers?
Well, I assume that it's different in different places. We live on a kibbutz in Gush Etzion, kibbutz Osh Tzurim, and our kibbutz has a home for lone soldiers, and we work with Osei Chayil to give them everything that they need here.
When you say a lone soldier, many Americans are familiar with the notion of a lone soldier, of let's say an American who their family is, I don't know, in Teaneck, in Florida, and they have a child who is defending the Jewish people in Israel. There is another kind of lone soldier that you are referring to. Their family is in Israel, correct?
Right. So lone soldiers are really soldiers that don't have a home to go back to when they get home from the army. So it can be because their family is abroad, and it can be because they have different issues with their families and different reasons that they can't go home to their biological family parents. So in our case, in the case of Osei Chayil, it's mostly soldiers from ultra-Orthodox families that their families weren't really all for them enlisting in the army. And some of them have some relationship with their families and some have none at all. But their home is not a place that they can go to, that they can go home to, have their family waiting for them with hot meals and do their laundry and take care of them.
So tell me a little bit how you first found out about this. You're living on a kibbutz in Har Etzion. It's a community that most people who are of military age are serving. So you have your hands full. I don't know, your own family setup, but maybe you could tell us a little bit how you found space in your life to get involved in this.
Our kibbutz puts a big emphasis on finding other ways to help and good things that we can do for other people in the community and out. And one of the things is really this home for lone soldiers. It's been going on for years and years, but about 2 years ago, a new house was built. A beautiful house. They put in a lot of money and thought in the planning, and it's really a homey place. And that's where these soldiers live. They each have their own room. And the bottom floor is really, it feels like a home with a big kitchen and a big living room and a room with like a pool table and big television and all those things just to make them feel at home. They have a backyard that's really nice, and it's a really good place to be. It feels homey, and they really call it their home. So that's where they live, and that's where their things are, and that's where they sleep. But each soldier has an adoptive family. Some of them have more than one. Technically, the job of the family is to invite them for meals, to have them for meals mostly Friday nights. And some families take it much farther than that, which was the case with us and David.
You were the adoptive family for an incredible person, David Mittleman, Hashem yikkom damo, who was lost in battle. Maybe you can begin with the beginning of that story, how you first came to know David, and a little bit about, his life and his journey towards you.
So there's a woman here in the community. Her name is Kana Schechter, and she's in charge of the lone soldiers in the kibbutz. And she's the one who sets up the families for each soldier. She tries to make a good fit, even though, she doesn't really know them very well when they get here. But we had signed up. We were on the list, and she called and said that there was a soldier coming and that she thinks it could be a good fit. So he came for one Shabbos to try out the place, to see, the kibbutz and the house, and to meet us. He debated a little bit because it's a religious kibbutz, and the home for the soldiers here is also considered a religious home.
I mean, there's kosher, Shabbos is observed publicly in the community.
Yeah. So in their rooms, they can do whatever they want, but in the home, they have to keep kosher and they have to keep Shabbos in the public places, and also going in and out is a little bit difficult because there's no transportation. And so he debated a little bit because he came from an ultra-Orthodox family, but he himself was not religious. So he wasn't sure if that's what he wanted, but he did have friends already here. So he decided to give it a try. So he came to us for a Shabbos.
And when is this?
This was the beginning of August 2022.
Okay, so like a full year ago from this past summer.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he came, and she told us to be very careful and gentle with him because he was at the beginning of this journey of figuring out who he was and what he wanted, and he didn't really like talking about his past. She said, just be gentle with him. Don't ask too much. Don't push. And that's what we did. He came for Friday night dinner, and mostly he just could say, watch the show of our family at our Friday night, kidding around, our regular dynamics.
Was there any tell when you met him that he was raised in a Haredi home?
Mostly that he really knew very little about the secular world or the world outside of the Haredi world. He did not know one word of English, not one. And our home is a mixed English and Hebrew speaking. My husband is Israeli, and we talk a mixed English and Hebrew. He did not know one word in English. And also other things, like he didn't have any knowledge of things that are outside of Judaism.
Gotcha. Secular culture. When did he leave the Haredi world? At what age was he?
Just a few months earlier.
Wow.
He was still in the yeshiva about 6 months before we met him. It was very, very new. It was the beginning. It was the beginning of him figuring out what he wanted. He wasn't in the army yet. He'd left the yeshiva and he moved to a farm, which belongs to a family that brings in those kinds of kids or young adults that are trying to figure out what they're looking for and where they're going. And he was there for a few months with friends of his that he knew from before. And at first he had no idea what he wanted. He showed up there still dressed like a Haredi, and slowly he figured out what he wanted. He figured out what he wanted religiously, and he figured out that he wanted to be a soldier and that he wanted to be in Golani, which is an infantry unit. So by the time he got to us, that he had figured out. He didn't know when exactly he was going to enlist, and he wasn't sure yet that he was going to be in Golani, even though that's what he really wanted. But that's it. It was really the beginning.
As your relationship progressed, did he begin to open up more? Did you get a window into his searching of what is my relationship going to be with Yiddishkeit, with the state of Israel, with just my future is so unknown now? And what is my relationship going to be like with my family, which I'm sure we'll explore more, my biological family?
Yeah, so he definitely opened up. Started slowly. First of all, after that Shabbos, he decided that he wanted to stay and that he wanted to become part of our family, which was very exciting for us.
What do you think won him over about your family?
Maybe the dog. I'm kidding.
That'll do it. That'll do it.
Yeah, I think that he got what he was looking for. We were very welcoming and warm, and we were just really happy to have him, but we didn't push at all. We just gave him the time that he needed and wanted.
Did you have family members, children who were of the same age?
So my oldest is 18. He's actually going into the army in a few weeks.
Wow.
So they're exactly 2 years apart, 2 years minus a day. Their birthdays are one day after the other. And then I have a 15-year-old and a 10-year-old.
So your hands truly are full. You have a Haredi family that you were caring, and then you have this lone soldier who came from, the yeshiva world. And tell me how he started opening up his relationship with his family and how you conceived of your role vis-a-vis his actual family.
We weren't sure what our role was. We sort of learned it, as we went along with it. We tried to be everything that we could be for him, but without pushing too hard. So right after we met him, as soon as he got a date to go into the army, we made him a little party and we got him a gift.
What'd you get him? Do you remember?
Of course. We got him like the belt that goes on the gun.
Oh, sure. Okay.
So we got his name embroidered on it, and we gave him that, and he loved it. We made it in the colors of Golani, which he was very into. So we had a barbecue. My mom came, and it was just quiet, intimate, but it was a party. And then we took him the first day when he went into the army, and there were some issues. They weren't sure he was going to be able to get into what he wanted, and so we made some phone calls, and we tried to be there and to help him out. Also, he didn't know much about the army. He had Osechail, of course, that helped him a lot with all of that, with all the technical things and making sure he had all the equipment that he needed, and they were amazing. There was nothing lacking. He had everything he needed and much more. And Aaron Granot, who was the head of Osechail, was there for him all the time. We also talked to him a few times when there were some bureaucratic things. So we really tried to be there for him as much as we could, respecting, what he wanted and what he didn't want to share there. So it started out like that. And then just every week, we felt like every time he came home and he was with us, we felt like he was opening up a little bit more. And then one time he was here, I don't even remember why, but in the middle of a week and not on Shabbos. And he took out his phone and showed us a picture of his family from his sister's wedding, including him in the whole Haredi look.
Was this after he left or before that he was still wearing the lavush when he would go to a family simcha?
No, he was still there. This was like towards the end before he left the yeshiva and his family.
Okay.
It was his sister's wedding. He totally looked totally Haredi, but also he had lost a lot of weight preparing for the army.
As one does.
Got contact lenses and, the whole thing. So he took out the phone. He said, "You won't believe what I looked like 6 months ago." And he showed us the picture. And I remember us like looking at each other and thinking to ourselves, okay, it's happening. He's opening up. He's letting us in.
You remember in that moment, because there was something very unspoken when he comes over, and this person has actual family, that you have such a clear memory. You knew this was a turning point of sorts.
Yeah, it definitely was.
Of being there in a real way. And at that time, did you start to ask him about his family, or that was just the very, very beginning?
We did. He had said things here and there, like we knew he went to his grandmother the night before he went into the army. At the time, we didn't know that his mother and some of his sisters were also there. He would say that he talked to his mother, but we just, listened to whatever he said and didn't ask questions. And we felt like this was his way of saying, you can ask.
Yeah.
I'm letting you in. And it was a really important step in our relationship. Pretty quickly after that, he was totally part of the family, joking around, laughing at everything, the kids teasing each other, making fun of each other. He would come and take the dog for a walk.
Tell me, because this is really what fascinates me and what I'm really trying to understand. What do you feel your role should be vis-a-vis his actual family? Would he talk about pain, anger, bitterness, cynicism? I mean, he was raised in a world that he obviously felt the need to move away from. At the same time, there's something very visceral and necessary about having a healthy relationships with one's biological parents, regardless of the ideological divides. How deep into those waters would you wade in those conversations, and how did you conceive of your own responsibility vis-a-vis encouraging him or not encouraging him to have a relationship with his actual family?
So we didn't really talk about that much. A lot of that picture we actually filled in one after he was killed and when we spent more time talking to his friends. And I think because they were going through similar processes with their families, they spent a lot more time talking about those things. So he didn't really talk to us much about it. It would come out here and there. We knew who he talked to, who he didn't talk to, who he met with. Once in a while he would go and meet with his mom or some of his sisters. Or once I took him to the doctor close to where his sister worked, so I brought him to visit her. We knew what sort of relationship there was, but we didn't talk about it that much.
Because this was a place he could be normal, he could be regular, so to speak. And you didn't feel like it was weighing on him constantly.
Not so much. There was one time his sister had a baby and he had a hard time deciding if he should go to the bris or not. So that was one time that we did talk about it.
Do you remember what he decided?
He didn't go. And we talked about it a little bit. Obviously didn't tell him what I think he should do, but I told him that if he wanted to go, even for a little bit, I would drive him, wait in the car a little bit so that he could just go and, be there for a few minutes even. But he ended up deciding not to go.
Did you ever consider, or did you ever actually reach out directly to any family members of his to almost like get on the same page?
So we met his mom once. She came to one of his ceremonies at the kotel. It was a last minute thing. I think he was happy that she came. She came by herself and we met her there. It was at the beginning. We had only known him for probably about 2 months. She seemed very sweet. She was happy to meet us. She kept thanking us for being there for him. But that was really it. We talked once a few days later because I wanted to send her some pictures that we took. She has a phone that doesn't have a camera on it. So
Sure. It's harder to keep in touch, share pictures. Yeah.
So we talked once and I asked her if she has an email address, if she wants me to send pictures. They don't have a computer at home either. So
Wow.
And I think there was one other time that one of us dialed the other one by mistake or something. We didn't keep in touch. Really, the next time we talked to her was when he was missing after October 7th.
And he came from, just to understand a little bit more, from a Litvish family, from a Hasidic family.
Litvish.
From a yeshiva world-oriented family. Let's fast forward a little bit to October 7th. You know, you developed this relationship with somebody who in many ways you considered like your own child is coming home, in the sense that it's work. It's real work. You're doing laundry.
No, so laundry actually I never did.
You don't have to do because he's in the side house. Okay.
Yeah, in the house they have a few washing machines and he was very responsible with that. I offered because he would come home exhausted and I said, just bring me the laundry and go to sleep. But he would first take care of that stuff and take a shower and then he'd come over. So I want to say it really wasn't work. It was just having another person in our family who we really, really cared about a lot. And he became part of us. He became one of us. He wasn't home much. And he didn't sleep here. And if you look at it, it was only a year and 2 months, our whole relationship. And it wasn't that many hours or days because most of the time he was in the army. But he really meant a lot to us. And we tried to be there for him. And, you know, there were times that he needed us more and there were times that he needed us less. You know, when it was harder in the army, then we talked more often and tried to help him figure things out. He had an infection in his leg. So he was home for a few weeks and we took him to the doctor and I changed his bandages every day and, you know, got him his medication. And there were times that it was more intense and we were with him more. And there were weeks that we would just talk to him a couple times a week, or if he didn't have his phone all week.
Sure. My characterization of work is work that is not work. When you have someone who's a part of your family, I don't consider it, you know, my daily professional work responsibilities to make lunch for my kids. It's the work that's not work. It's more than just, you know, take whatever you want. You know, a guest steps in for an offer. It's more than that. It's the work that's not work. And to open up your heart and home to somebody who's in such real need for it really speaks, I think, in a larger sense to what Klal Yisrael, what the Jewish people are all about. But take me a little bit to October 7th. Was he with your family on Yom Tif?
No, he was in the army.
Okay.
For the Shabbos Yom Tif. He was in Kisufim, which is right on the border there, Yom Tif. And we knew that he was mostly guarding the, what's it called? The entrance to the base?
Yeah.
I don't know the army words in English.
That's okay.
So he was doing that a lot because he was having some trouble and he wasn't sure if he wanted to continue in his job in the combat. So he wasn't going out on missions. He was staying more in the base and guarding the entrance there. Yeah, so he was there. And pretty quickly when we understood what was going on there, we got a bad feeling because we didn't hear from him.
Well, let me just ask a little bit of like almost a technical question. Mm-hmm. Does the army know you exist? Meaning the army, I'm sure, you know, finds out who your biological family is. Does the army even know that he has this relationship with an adoptive family, so to speak, to reach out to you, to let you know that something's amiss, or do you just need to call frantically to see how he's doing?
So the army did know about us, and I knew that because I had gotten like messages before Chagim or invitations to ceremonies and things like that. So we knew that they had us on their list, but we didn't know who his emergency contacts were because the army really will contact one person, not a few. So we weren't sure about that. And really for those 3 days that we were waiting, we actually got the bsora. We found out that he was killed only on Tuesday, 3 days after. So during those 3 days when we were waiting to hear what happened with him, we also didn't know who they would call, or they don't call, they show up, they come to the house. So we didn't know if they were going to show up at our house or at his parents' house. They went to his parents, but they did have our information. We had talked to different commanders of his over the year and the 14 months when he had that infection in his leg and when there were other things. So we had spoken to them and they knew about us.
Who eventually told you that he was killed?
His mother.
His mother reached out to you.
Yeah, what happened was over Shabbos, Simchas Torah, we were, slowly figuring out what was happening. We live in a kibbutz where most of the people are soldiers, officers. So during the morning, everyone was just called up. It's a kibbutz where there are no cars on Shabbos. And it was just looked like a freeway. People getting called up, driving off. And slowly we started to figure out what was happening. But we didn't hear from him. And then the next day, I talked to his mom. I think she called me the first time to ask if we had heard anything. And then over those 3 days, we talked a few times. There were rumors that someone saw him here, someone saw him there, but nothing really sounded convincing. They really, and we talked a lot since then, they really had no idea. She said that they were lucky enough to not be worried those 3 days because they didn't know
where he was stationed.
Yeah, and they didn't know if there were lots of soldiers that didn't have time or phones to contact their families. And since we're in a different world where everyone's in the army and we knew, my nephew was in the battle, but he had time to send a message, I'm okay, and call everyone when he had a second, or we knew that most of the soldiers that were okay had time to at least send a message with someone else and let someone know that they were alive. And so we didn't know if he was kidnapped or if he was killed or if he was injured and we didn't hear yet, but we knew something was wrong. So we talked to his parent. I talked to his mom a few times over those 3 days. And then on Tuesday morning at about 6:45, she called. And as soon as I saw her name on the phone, I answered and said, they showed up. And she said, yes.
That's when you asked. They showed up.
Yeah.
They came.
Which is the officers that come to tell the family. So I said, okay, I'm on my way. We got in the car and we drove there. I was just thinking to myself, I don't think I asked her if I can come. I think I just said I'm coming, which I don't know in retrospect if that was insensitive, but that's what happened.
When you have the instinct, it is an instinct that is coming from a deep place of sensitivity. That's the work that isn't work. That's the coming without an invitation. That's family. That's what it is. And you knew where he lived, so you drove. He lives in Yerushalayim.
Well, I asked her the address. I knew what city they lived in, but I asked her the address. She gave me the address, and we got in the car, my husband and I. He drove me there, and then he went to tell my son, because my son was in a mechina, preparation for the army. We didn't want to tell him on the phone.
Yeah.
I mean, he knew that we were worried, and he knew that, there was a good chance that that's what happened, but we didn't want to tell him on the phone. So Gil, my husband, dropped me off at their house, and he went to tell my son, Lavi, and then they came. So I was there with them for a few hours. When I got there, the officers were still there. They stayed for a while to be there with them and also to go through all the bureaucracy about the funeral, about the different arrangements.
Do you have any description of what was happening in the house then? What are you doing? There are siblings, there's a family to tell. Tell me a little bit more what was transpiring.
So when I got there, his parents were there with the officers, and I think two of the older sisters. He was the second. He has one older sister, 6 younger sisters, and one brother. So all the younger kids were in the back. I think some were still sleeping, some were just waking up. I think that 2 of the sisters were there. At first we were just, it was just some hugs and some, just trying to process what was going on. And then there was also all the technical stuff, sitting with the officers, they were filling out the forms and planning the funeral and those kinds of things. After a while, the grandparents came, and then slowly some other people showed up. At some point, I went with his mother to tell the younger siblings. I'm a psychologist, and she was not sure what to say and how to go about it, and so we did it together.
Do you have any memories about what she said or how that news was transmitted?
Yeah, so I do, just because I helped her decide what to say. It was important that she say it and not me, a stranger. It had to come from her. But we talked a little bit about the fact that she has to use the words. You can't just hint. You have to use the real words and say that he was killed, that he died, that he won't be back anymore. It was a little bit tricky because he hadn't been home in so long. So saying that he wasn't going to come back anymore wasn't, like she said, that she had to explain that he wouldn't come to our house anymore either.
Gotcha. Wow. An absence in the realest sense. And they were almost used to a softer absence, an absence of, visits. And this is, transmitting the news of the absence. That is the ultimate absence. And the funeral, the Shiva. Tell me a little bit about that, because this is a Shiva that I assume took place in a Haredi community. I assume the funeral was a mix of both Haredim and members of your community and kibbutz and soldiers. Tell me a little bit about some of your memories about those communities interacting.
So the funeral was an issue because we assumed that it was obvious that he would have a military funeral, and they decided that they wanted to have a regular Haredi funeral, not in a military cemetery. And without the whole ceremony that we were sure that he would have wanted. I didn't even think that that was an option, that they wouldn't have that. And then I was there sitting with them and they were doing the planning and whatever. And then they said, yeah, no, we're going to have a civilian funeral. And I was shocked. I didn't really know what to say because they're his parents and it's their decision. But I knew 100% that that's not what he would have wanted. And I debated with myself, but there wasn't long to debate. And I said, are you sure about that? Because I know I can't be in his head, but this is one thing that I'm so sure about, that it would be important to him to be buried as a soldier. They said, no, that's what we decided. And then I said, maybe you can just think about it again. So they went back to the back of the house and thought about it again. And they talked to the rabbi and they came back a little while later and said, no, we're going ahead with the civilian funeral. And I was really upset about it, again, because he would have been really upset. And
also, you're so much more familiar with the significance of a military funeral. And, I don't have a stake in this, but to understand for a Haredi family, maybe this brings some measure of comfort and closeness to have him, buried closer to the family, a family plot. They probably don't have their other, immediate relatives there, but I could imagine that being deeply painful for you to watch.
It was really hard. And actually, they didn't even bury him in a cemetery that was close to home because the rabbis there make the decisions. And the rabbi said, no, we'll go to some cemetery near Petach Tikva. It's not even close to them. And again, I very gently said, maybe you still want, like, to the mom. I said, you're his mother. Some of it should be, also what'll be right for you if you want to be able to have him closer. But that was the decision of the rabbis. And I left there really, really upset about it. It was a big thing. Again, I respect his parents and their decision, but it was a really big thing because he would have been really, really angry about it. He died as a soldier because he was a soldier. He didn't die. He was killed because he was a soldier.
Kiddush Hashem, no question about it.
And he also died. We didn't talk about it yet, but he was a hero. He saved a lot of lives and killed a lot of terrorists.
Tell me a little bit about that. How do you know that? What do you know about his final moments defending Amchi Yisrael, defending the Jewish people?
So what we know is that he was at the entrance to the base a little bit before 7. They started to realize that something big was going on. And a friend of his, he was, I don't know what it's called in English. It's called a magist. He had a very big rifle that he used. He didn't have it on him because it's more for battle than when you're just guarding a base. But a little bit before 7, like probably around the quarter to 7, 10 to 7, a friend of his who had just finished a patrol heard that there were all these terrorists on their way there. And he went and brought 2 of those, what's called the mag, for himself and for David. And as he brought it, tens of terrorists started to come trying to take over the base. And the 2 of them fought for a long time. We don't know exactly how many minutes. For a long time, killed tens of terrorists. And what we know is that they bought time for the soldiers in the base to get organized and really to guard the base and also the kibbutz that's right next to there, and really saved tons of lives until they were both shot. But they weren't shot until they were out of ammunition. They were found without 1 bullet left.
Wow. Literally to die defending the Jewish people, it's a hard thing to even imagine. And the stories, it's awe-inspiring. Somebody who is literally up there alone in so many senses. Somebody who is alone because of the choices they've made and are not, surrounded by the family and community they grew up in. And alone in the sense that we are, Israel, surrounded by enemies, surrounded by people who want to destroy us, the way the Talmud describes, of being a lone sheep surrounded by 70 wolves, and feeling that aloneness, and nonetheless, in your final moments, expiring and being killed, Al Kiddush Hashem, defending the larger family of the Jewish people, is simply remarkable. It's awe-inspiring. There are no words to properly explain that, and how all of your Yiddishkeit is being expressed in that moment of defending the Jewish people.
I do want to say, though, that he wasn't alone. And my kids don't even let us call him a lone soldier because he wasn't alone. He had a lot of people that loved him.
Yes.
He really, really did. He wasn't alone, and he knew he had us, and he had his close friends here that went through the whole thing together, and they're really family. And he also had his part of his family, of his biological family, who really, all of them, I'm sure, loved him very much. Some of them had more trouble demonstrating it, but he had a lot of people who loved him, and he wasn't alone. And it's important to us
I appreciate you saying that. Maybe we could go back, tell me a little bit at the funeral. There are mixings of two very different communities who are now coming together fairly soon in the aftermath of October 7th.
Yeah.
This is just a few days, week after.
3 days.
3 days after. This is happening really in the moments after October 7th. We're sitting here many months later where we feel like we've been living in this reality for a long time. The whole world was literally upside down, in those 72 hours following the horrific terrorist attacks of October 7th. What are the scenes and the images and the words that stick with you from his funeral and from the Shiva?
The funeral really was amazing in that way. There were tons of people, really a mixture of Haredis and modern Orthodox families from here, and also just people from all over that heard about him. People wrote on Facebook, there's a lone soldier who's being buried, and just come, and lots and lots and lots of people came, people that didn't know him. There weren't a lot of soldiers because most of the soldiers were busy.
In battle.
Yeah. So really hardly any of his friends could be there, which was really hard for them. And, there weren't a lot of soldiers. Normally when a soldier is killed in Israel, it's just tons and tons of green. You see all the soldiers. And because also there wasn't a military ceremony, really you didn't feel much of the army, but there were tons of Israeli flags.
Was it mentioned in the Hespedim that he was a soldier?
So I don't remember the exact words. They use other words to sort of...
Almost like euphemisms to hint at
They'll say Kiddush Hashem, they'll say things like that, not so much army, soldier,
Okay.
Those. It's more those kinds of things. But my son gave a hesped, which was very nice that they let us do that. My son really wanted to speak, and he went up covered in an Israeli flag and with a baseball hat, not a black hat. And we have some pretty powerful pictures of him with the Israeli flag just surrounded by black. But he wanted to talk, and we really wanted there to be room for who he was, in the past couple of years, and not just where he came from.
And the family allowed for that space, obviously.
Yeah, we asked if that would be okay, and they said yes. They gave us a lot of space. His mom stood next to me at the funeral. We stood together. They knew how much he meant to us, and I think they knew how much we meant to him also, and we were right in there with them. So when we asked if my son could give a hesped, they said yes right away. And then there was the whole regular, ceremony, the whole funeral. And then at the end, when people started to leave, we asked his mom quietly if it would be okay if we stayed and had a little ceremony of our own. And she said yes. His dad and most of their family had already left the burial area, and we stayed and we had our own little something that we felt more connected to. We sang Hatikva and Ani Ma'amin and saluted to him and said a few words and put a flag on his grave.
Did any of the family stick around for your kind of adoptive family ceremony?
His mom. It wasn't just our family. It was people from our community and friends of his that were there. And
his mom stuck around for that.
And his mom stayed. Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about, what your relationship with his mother. Did you ever feel, even out of curiosity or understanding David better, to ask her, what happened?
We didn't talk about what happened. I think it's too hard for her right now to talk about it. It's very complicated because there were differences between his parents in their connection with him and in decisions that they each made. And she has a lot of respect for her husband's choices, but they're different from hers. And I think the whole process now has been very hard. And I feel like it's caused them a little bit to rewrite history in a way that's easier for them to live with, which is hard for us because, they were interviewed a few times and sort of told a story that's different from what we know happened about their relationship. And
what do you mean by that?
They talked a lot about how their home was always open to him and why he chose to be a lone soldier and live somewhere else. And they talked about the fact that he was always welcome to come to be there and things like that. And it's different from what we know from him and also from his friends. And so sometimes it's hard, but I know it wouldn't be right to ask questions right now. There were things that I asked about, but they were more decisions that were made afterwards. Like when they chose the tombstone, and again, it was a question if it was going to be a military one or not, and they decided not. And there, I felt like it was important to open that up for discussion. So we talked about that. They ended up, again, deciding not to have a military one, which we were very upset about.
Are you still close close with the mother now? Are you in touch with her?
So we talk every once in a while. We met a few times at Shloshim, and there was a ceremony here a couple weeks ago. A shul was dedicated to the soldiers from our area that were killed in the war. So his parents were there. And we've spoken a few times. I was at their house a few times during the Shiva and also a couple times after. So we talk once in a while, not often, but once in a while we do. I like her. She's really nice, and she's going through so much, and it's really hard. There are differences of opinion.
Are you able to hold on to that? Meaning you spent a lot of time, and obviously you have your own connection with him that is following his upbringing, his childhood, his community. And how do you make sure, almost you, Yael, on an individual level, that your work, especially with David, creates more communal closeness, especially, and it could be impossible. You could tell me it's too hard, given all of your time, investment, commitment, love that you had in David, especially when he didn't have the infrastructure and he was leaving a community. Do you ever kind of check your own temperature and make sure that this experience still leaves room, doesn't become too angry or painful for you when you look at, other sections of Israel? Would you look at the totality of this experience humanizing more, let's say, the Haredi community in your eyes, or has it gotten much more difficult?
That's a big question. I don't think that it changed much of how I look at the Haredi community. First of all, I try to be very open to different people having different, ways. There's a lot of anger now at the Haredi community for not, being in the army and not taking their part. And it's hard. It's hard to not get angry about that. I think it's a lot of good people that, I don't agree with a lot of their decisions. I don't think it made me hate anyone more or love anyone more. I don't think so. I think that I'm just really happy that we had the time with him. And in one of my conversations with Tamar, there was a time that was a little bit difficult because there was a lot of publicity to his story. And when there's publicity, a lot of people let themselves say things that they really don't know much about. And there were people that said really mean things about them. So they were really upset, and it had all different ramifications there in their community, and so they were really, really upset.
People said, just so I understand the story
People
you're
said
telling.
That they didn't say Shiva. People said just really mean things.
In that direction, which is, that is incredibly painful. And tell me, you spoke with her following there, heard all this.
So they weren't sure if maybe we had talked to some of those journalists who wrote things about them. They were very hurt. So at some point I called and we had this whole conversation. It wasn't so easy, but we talked about it. And I said, look, I'm honest with you. I don't agree with a lot of the things that you decided, but I didn't go and talk about you behind your back, and I don't talk to any of these people. And I said, when I don't agree with you, I tell you. And it's your decision. But you see, I've been saying what I think because I feel like I'm representing the David of now, and you guys a little bit are representing the David of before. But I didn't go and talk to anyone, to the newspapers or whatever. But anyway, it was a hard conversation. But we talked about the fact that it's okay that we disagree. And then a little while later, she called me back just about something about the Shloshim. And she said, I thought about it. And the fact that we disagree is why you could be there for him when he needed you. That was very powerful.
That statement of our disagreements actually creating capacity to be there for the entirety of the experiences that people need support for is incredibly profound. There are many disagreements even outside of this, and disagreements that roil Israel in many ways, religious observance, army attendance, and these are very real disagreements that, God willing, we will see in our lifetime some way of integration, whatever that may be or whatever that may seem. But until we get to that time, to look at each of these disagreements as an opportunity for support, as an opportunity, well, I disagree in the way your home does X, Y, and Z, and therefore the Jewish people, that collective body, can step in and add, whether it's opening up a home, whether it's opening up Torah, whether it's opening up your heart in places where it is closed, and each family in their own individual way being a part of this collective entity. It is specifically because we disagree that we're able to be there for one another in larger ways. And it's beautiful what the mother said, and it's really even more beautiful the way that you embodied that opportunity in David's lifetime and in preserving his memory.
Thank you. I'd like to tell you about projects that we have in his memory.
Oh, please, yes.
Really quickly, we realized that we need to be busy and we need to be doing things. It was very hard to not, we didn't sit Shiva. Obviously, we went to the Shiva a few times, but we didn't sit Shiva. Shiva because it's not our biological family. And there was this crazy war going on and we didn't really know what to do with ourselves. And the best thing was to keep busy. So we really got our first project running within about 10 days from when David was killed. And that was dog tags with Shema Yisrael, with Kriyat Shema on them. We got them made. So it has Kriyat Shema, and on the bottom it says that it's in memory of David Mittleman.
Beautiful.
And the idea was to send them to soldiers on the different fronts. It's exactly like the real dog tags, and they could just put them on the same chain and wear them in battle and everywhere. As of now, we've made close to 20,000 of these dog tags.
What a beautiful way of commemorating these two components of David's life, the dog tag and the Shema Yisrael in memory of David Mittleman is so beautiful and really, encapsulates, where his life ultimately took him. Yeah. That's extraordinary.
It was amazing. And we were really surprised by how almost everyone that heard about it wanted it. Like soldiers, secular, religious, it didn't really matter. It's something that, that connected to most of Judaism. The second project, we tried to think of things that connected to him. And also we want to do things that'll make people smile and not just cry. So the second thing that we did was we had a cocktail concocted in his name, a new cocktail. He was 20 years old, but he was a kid because he was just discovering the world. And when he was home, he loved to go out and drink with his friends, just have fun. So we contacted a bar, a very famous bar in Tel Aviv. It's actually one of the top 50 in the world. And my husband talked to them and they loved the idea and they're amazing. And it's called the Imperial Bar in Tel Aviv. And they just volunteered to do amazing things. They made this cocktail. They asked us to tell them about him so they could get a feel of who he was and what kind of flavors. And then we had an opening at the bar. Lots of his friends came from the army and from all other places. We waited until a lot of his friends were out of Gaza. And it was just a time to smile and then cry and laugh and tell stories about him. And it was amazing. And one thing that we asked was that the recipe be open, not secret.
Yeah.
So we have the recipe. We really want to spread the word and have as many bars and hubs. And
can you tell me, I don't know if you know it off the top of your head, I'd be more than happy if you have the recipe. Is the cocktail have some official name?
It's called the King David.
The King David.
Yeah.
I love it. And what's in that cocktail?
It doesn't sound so good, but it really is delicious. Lime, apple, celery, pineapple. I don't know all the words in English, but Bombay Spire or something like that.
Send me the Hebrew recipe. We'll have it translated. We'll bring it to America. We'll see if we can make some kosher for Pesach version.
That would be amazing.
Because right when he said apple, celery, it sounds like a little Pesach Seder.
A little charoset.
A little charoset, exactly. A charoset beverage.
Our next project, which is the big one, financially at least, they're all important to us, but this is the big one. We want to have a park in his memory on our kibbutz. Our kibbutz has tons of kids and teenagers and soldiers, and we really want to have a place that would be fun for them to get together in his memory. Again, we want things that'll make us think of him with a smile, and friends were huge to him. They were his support system, his fun, his happiness.
Is there a place people could find out more if they want to contribute to this park in his memory?
So we're working on it. It's going to be through the Gush Etzion Foundation. Hopefully I'll be able to send a link soon.
Yael, it is incredible the capacity to preserve not only the pain, but also the smiles and the joy and the life of David, of opening up a new world to him and being there to preserve his life and his absence and his loss. It is really incredible. And I am so grateful for you speaking with me today.
I'm happy to. And really, we just want people to hear about him and know who he was and what he did. So thank you.
One thing that is incredible that Yael is organizing is a park to be built right outside of the community that took David in when he was serving in the army. It is a beautiful campaign, and if it's something that touched you as much as it touched me, you can of course look. We'll have links not only to Osei Chayil, but for the Mittleman Park that Yael is building in memory of David Mittleman. The community is really building in his memory, so that David Mittleman, Hashem yikkom damo, a Golani soldier who fell in heroic battle at the Kisufim military post, has a place that perhaps in future generations will be occupied not just by, God forbid, lone soldiers, but by people with their families sitting together in peace and serenity, protecting the Jewish people. There was one listener to 1840 who reached out to me. His first name is Binyamin. He's a very special person. And I told him that I was working on this episode, and he actually told me that he has a friend who grew up in the States, went to mainstream yeshivas, and for a host of reasons decided to move to Israel and join the IDF. And I reached out to that friend, and he was incredibly sweet. but he was very hesitant to join and to speak even a little bit. And I kept on pushing. I said, these are important stories. People should hear them. We shouldn't repeat these mistakes. We have to build families and relationships that are able to weather these differences in much stronger ways. And eventually, I don't know, maybe I asked enough times. He's somebody who's so sensitive and so thoughtful, but I prevailed upon him. And I want him to join at the very least to say why he was so hesitant, because I thought it was for all the right reasons. Here is another conversation with an incredible soldier from an American yeshiva home. Why were you so hesitant about joining in on this episode?
Mostly it was because of my mother. She's a very, closed off person. She doesn't like publicity or putting her name out there. Also, how maybe me being in the army would affect how people in the community look at my family. Maybe even it could affect my sister with shidduchim in the future. My mother comes from a less religious background. She's about Shuva. And for her, it was, almost like a badge of honor that her son went to a good yeshiva in Brooklyn. And then when I decided to, choose my own path in life and veer from, I guess, a typical Brooklyn standard, it kind of reflected badly on her. Sharing that to the world might hurt her and affect her in even a worse way.
There's nothing holier, especially in this series, than somebody whose own, because you agree that your story is very important, but you didn't want, even for the sake of a mission and ideology as important as this, of protecting the Jewish people, you had this very honest and sincere, sensitivity. I'm wondering if you could share a little bit on a personal level. How did you maintain that relationship with a parent, even when they were kind of disapproving or they didn't hold it up as a badge of honor when you initially went into the army? Was that something that you would actively talk about, or was your strategy more to just avoid the topic altogether?
Well, for me, it's a little different. I didn't come to Israel in order to draft. I came to Israel because my issues with my mother, we couldn't reconcile. And I just got to a point where I thought it was better if I live on my own. So I came to Israel when I was 16 and I finished high school here. And because I'm an Israeli citizen, I was required to draft. It was always sort of part of the plan ever since I came to Israel. It wasn't exactly that I left home and went directly to the army. By the time that I already drafted, my relationship with my mother had improved dramatically. The first half a year was a little tough. But, my mother has a very either my way or the highway type of mindset. And I kind of chose the highway, and the distance did us some good. At the moment, our relationship is flourishing and we speak every day without fail.
Beautiful.
And I have a lot of respect for her. And even though she may disapprove of what I'm doing, I know she always has my best intentions in mind.
What would you tell mothers or parents from the world that does not look at, serving in the army as certainly not an ideal, but something that they disapprove of a great deal? Is there anything that you have seen that resonates or that people find helpful to help a parent come along to be able to see the sacrifice and the risk that their child is taking to protect the Jewish people, to see it in a more positive light? Or does it sometimes just take a lot of time?
I think it takes a lot of time, and I think every parent is slightly different. There's a lot of risks involved. Some of the reasons, in my opinion, why parents may be opposed, it could be a religious point of view, or it could be simply that I don't want my son to die and I'm willing to do anything that he should get out of that situation. To reconcile with the idea that their son's in the army, I think it just takes time. It takes time, conversation. At the end of the day, when the child turns 18, if he really wants to do something, there's not so much a parent can do to stop him. If the parent values the relationship, open dialogue is the only way to go.
What did you draw upon in those years to maintain that relationship, even when you were not getting the approval that you rightfully deserve for choosing to protect the Jewish people in the land of Israel? How did you develop this perspective and this capacity that you're still able to have such respect and such a warm, nourishing relationship with a parent, even though this issue was very divisive and I have no doubt extraordinarily painful?
As I said earlier, it was mostly divisive when I first came to Israel. So when I was already 16, my mother kind of got over the whole hurdle of, my son's living on his own and he's living his own life and making his own decisions that she doesn't agree with. By the time I already drafted to the army, my mother already accepted the fact that I was going to the army. And the main thing that bothered her, I think it was less from a religious point of view, which also, she had a fear that the army would affect me, that my level of observance would decrease. But it was mostly just from a place of fear because I drafted to a combat unit. And especially now with the war, the issue was mostly resolved already by the time I drafted. Like, our relationship had improved dramatically. It was more just trying to convince me, if you're going to go to the army, then just go work in the kitchen or something, or do something else besides being in combat.
Has your relationship with your friends from yeshiva, has October 7th affected the way they look at you more positively? 100%.
100%. The truth is, I didn't really stay in contact with any of them. When I left Israel, I didn't really really tell a lot of people. It was a very quick last minute decision, and I lost contact with most of my friends there besides one or two. My Rebbeim kept in contact with me throughout all these years.
Is that true?
Yeah, one thing I have to say for the community, the yeshiva, as much as I maybe didn't get along with the Chaver there, the Rebbeim were the best, and I didn't even tell them what yeshiva I was going to in Eretz Yisrael. They tracked me down, and all of a sudden my grandmother got a call from one of my Rebbeim. I have no idea how they got her number, and I've been in contact with them for these 6 years. Just a month ago, one of them came to visit in Israel, and we met up. He let me know that some of my friends from when I was in the yeshiva, that they came to Israel to learn, and just a week ago I met up with them. It was a very funny contrast. 6 years went by, and all of a sudden I'm standing on uniform with a gun, and they're black hat, white shirt. And I saw what I think was admiration in their eyes. I think because of October 7th, they understand the importance of what we're doing, and that if we don't have an army, then, Am Yisrael can't exist as it is today. So I definitely think October 7th changed a lot of people's perspective, 100%.
That is so beautiful. I did not know that, and I'm so glad that you shared that your Rebbeim from your yeshiva, this is a mainstream, pretty serious yeshivish place, not only have kept in touch with you, that's pre-October 7th, they've been in touch with you?
Yeah, for 6 years already.
That is very heartening and very moving, and I really think your story, we've only been in touch a little bit, but you ooze a certain type of maturity and decency and capacity to hold a lot of multiple worlds together. I've never heard a negative word from you about the world that you came from or the world that you're in now, and we need more people like you who have the capacity and breadth, not only as they are making, such a serious sacrifice, but who come from such a complex upbringing and be able to hold it all together is the type of big Yiddishkeit and creating enough room for all of Amcha Yisrael that we need to see and hear more of. I am so grateful that you took a moment to speak with us today.
Thank you for the kind words.
It was so moving to hear his hesitation. He was hesitant because he didn't want to hurt, God forbid, his parents. He didn't want to hurt his mother. And he knew that she had limited capacity in this, and he just didn't want to come out and have his name everywhere and had her being judged. And I think it highlighted in many ways what the point and what not the point of this episode is. The point of this episode is not to chastise parents who are struggling with this, but to kind of find a way to speak with graciousness and with sensitivity, to give encouragement, to know that even people who are making these choices are not doing it, God forbid, God forbid, they're not doing it out of spite to their parents. In fact, and this was a theme throughout, everybody desperately wants that their familiar relationship, their relationship with their parents should be good, should be gesund, should be happy and healthy. And if we ourselves, both as children and as parents, wherever we find ourselves in life, can make sure that the hashkafic consequences of our decisions do not erode the family, but we're able to make choices in a way passionately, committedly, seriously, but not at the expense, to do so with a language, with a sweetness that allows that family unit to be held intact, is not an easy task, but it is the task of the Jewish people. It's how we've stayed together over all of these millennia, over all of our differences. It's why the analogy of the Jewish people is one of a family. Which leads us to our final interview of somebody who I actually reached out to in previous years to join on 1840 with his parents. They were not yet ready to join together with him. He comes from a very serious rabbinic family. His father is a Rosh Yeshiva in a very, very well-known yeshiva. And what I found most remarkable about this interview is not the way that he reflects on his parents, but the way that he reflects on himself and the mistakes that he made in the way that his own hashkafic consequences served to distance himself from his parents, and the way that he began to revisit with so much more depth and so much more maturity his own religious worldview, his own hashkafa. This is somebody who is really a searcher with great sensitivity, who comes from a family that does have a lot at stake in the decisions of their children, as every family does, but especially a family that occupies a public sphere in the Jewish world. It is really a great privilege to introduce our final interview with our friend Avi. How would you describe your plan A when you were kind of in childhood? What did you feel the expectations of your life were supposed to be?
Me specifically, I was raised to be a Rosh Yeshiva, to be one of Gdolei Hador. I'm a single son. I have only sisters for a very well-respected Haredi family. And the expectation was for me to be a big Talmid Chacham, big Rosh Yeshiva. And to be honest, that's what I want. I want to be like Rabbi Kiva Eger. It was my inspiration.
What's your earliest memory of when you realized that this track and these expectations were not going to work out for you?
I remember the first time I had started questioning things out and trying to think. I was reading a book by Nietzsche, and he was talking about life after death and the privilege of life, and that people don't take life as the most valuable thing, and they don't want to live this life. They just want to go after and have heaven or hell or whatever. And that's will make me think about, how do I want to live life? How can I really, really live life the best way I can do it?
I have a hard time believing that is your first memory of realizing that this track was not for you, because again, from the world that you were raised in, the fact that you were reading Nietzsche, the philosopher, must be that something was already amiss. I mean, it's not typical that somebody raised in the Israeli Haredi yeshiva world is reading, existentialist philosophers. What brought you to even read Nietzsche in the first place?
I was like reading books. I would like to read stuff. Always got more knowledge. But I agree with you. And I want to take it one step further. I don't think that anyone at any time in history lived any religion because he thought it's not the truth. I think that the debate, if that's true, if there is a God, there's not God, is becoming after you're living or after you're going after there or whatever. And it's just becoming an excuse when you're facing the same problem you face when you was in the religion community. Then you're trying to find excuse. And the excuse is it true or is not true? I honestly believe in you. But for me, that's the really, really old memory that I think that I start questioning.
What age would you approximate this at?
I think I was 13, something like that.
13. Wow. You obviously were quite, the English word is precocious. I don't expect you to necessarily know that world. I don't know what the Hebrew equivalent of it is, but you were a bright kid if you're reading Nietzsche in your early teens. That's your earliest memory. What's your first memory of a discussion with your parents, of almost them discovering that the path you were on was not going to work out in the way that they expected? Meaning sometimes you realize it first, sometimes they realize it first. When was the first time that you had a conversation together? This is not working out for me.
That was when I was 15, and I remember it like it was today because it's something that really impacted my life. I was talking to my parents about this life and all the kind of question that teenager had. And my father looked at me and he says, be careful. Someone who asked this question, I know that in a couple years, many Talmidim I had, they went after Derech after they asked him this question. And I really, really remember that. I don't know why it's so powerful memory of me, but that's the first time I talked to my parents in that. And they was afraid.
Did you understand why they were afraid?
I can understand that because they have a lot of dream, a lot of hopes. And I was really, really good children. I was really going on the way to the path that they want me to. And that became a surprise to them. They don't understand where it's coming from. Of course I can understand that.
You had these early, thoughts, doubts, concerns, and then you have this conversation with your father. There's a long road in between somebody who decides, I'm not going to be a Gadol Hadar, I'm not going to be a Rosh Yeshiva, I'm not going to be a Rebbe, and from the world that you were raised in, actually enrolling into the army, into the Israeli Defense Forces. Bridge the gap for me. What happened that allowed you to even make that choice? And why not just, find another way? You have a patur, you're not obligated to go serve in the army. You could probably find a way. People find a way. You get a job, you build a life. Why join the army as a part of your process, which I imagine from the world you were raised in, that's a very serious choice. That creates a lot of distance from the world that you were raised in to the world where you are now.
Yeah, and I really want to make that point clear. Going to the army in Israel, like let's say in a regular family, it's like going to college in the United States. That's something regular that you do. And for people that coming from my background, it's becoming from much more ideology place because you're paying a lot of price for that decision. So it must be that I have some ideas and some ideology to do that. So the army itself, I wanted to do for two reasons. The first reason is that I want to be bound with the Israeli community. And in Israel, if you want to be part, if you want to succeed, you need to be in the army. That's the check thing that you need to do. And the second thing is that I feel responsibility. And I was saying that people in my age are taking responsibility, risking their life to protect the country. So what is my duty about that? What is my duty to my country, to my people, to the Jewish people? Of course. But if you're talking about the gap between when I say like I want to be out of Kivega and go to the army, the main thing that happened in between time, I have a lot of suffering from many things. I suffered from a lot of fighting from my parents, so for silly stuff, but it was really, really impacting me. I do believe that many people that going after Derech, that's the nakuda, that's the main stuff. They suffer and they can't find results. And I'm going to go specifically, people don't offer them result inside the Haredi community. So it's like black and white, either you in or either you out. And I decided to be out and try to find my way. great.
Tell me a little bit about the initial reaction that your parents had when you decided this is not for me, I'm going to leave. When was that conversation? Was that the same conversation about joining the army, or it was first, I don't see my future as within this community?
Okay, so to be precise, I've never had a conversation with my parents about joining the army. I left the house when I was 17 and I couldn't join the army yet. I left the house much before that. So in that specific way, it's much more different, let's say, from a lot of soldiers of Osechayel that they come in like week before they was in the yeshiva and they leave, they just want to be in the army, they just want to do that. And so for me, the last discussion with my parents was when I was 17, and it was more about the path they want me to go and where I want to go, and our world would split up.
Tell me how you connected first with Osechayel and ultimately made the choice to join the army. Had your parents' relationship by that point had healed a little bit? Were your parents present at your tekes, or it was still too painful at that point?
It was really a lot of painful, and I can also a little bit blame myself because I want a little bit of revenge, and I was feeling a lot of anger. I was a teenager. I don't understand a lot about the world. I don't understand a lot. I didn't want to think about where my parents coming from. So that was, I think, the rock bottom. We were in a really, really bad place. I was trying to do stuff to hurt them. I was dating like a Christian girl, and I wanted them to let them know that. I wanted to hurt them. And we was like, the beautiful thing is that it always was love and hate. I was never like, I don't care about my parents. So that's really, really important. But it was really, really big hate and a lot of pain at the time.
That is extraordinarily difficult to have that. And it's so interesting the way that you characterize your own behavior as you were making your own mistakes. And I'm curious if you could, just before we get to where we are now, because this is a really uplifting story, aside from the dating, what do you think were the other mistakes that you made in those teenage years when you're trying to, create your own life and almost go off, not to go off the derech, but to go off, find your own path? What were some of the mistakes that you think back upon?
So I think that teenagers and children, and this generation specifically, like to blame their parents because they bring children to the world and they don't have degree on parenthood. But most children like to understand you come to this world and you don't have a degree on how to be a children and how to be a good man. So it's something you work this out. So I was really think that I'm the smart person in the universe and every decision I'm making is the truth decision because I'm thinking about it. So I was really working my path. I do what I decided. And of course, I got a little bit older. I know that older people make the same mistake that I'm making. I should listen to them and taking a better path to myself. That's, I think, the main mistake I made. That's I trust only myself and only myself.
I assume that when you came to the army, you weren't still in the community that you grew up in, but you still had a way to go before understanding the rest of Israeli society. You went to mainstream yeshivas, cheder, the whole thing. What's the role that Osechayel played in helping you in this period in their life? What help did you need? You joined the army, so join the army. What's the role that Osechayel played in your life?
In my specific story, I came to Osechayel and I had like 5 months until I was recruited to the army.
How did you find Osechayel? It's well known?
Since it's well known, it's about I had a tour, it's called. I was reading that I'm learning in a certain yeshiva and I didn't know to go to the army. So I go to a certain place. It's called Tel HaShomer, and I go there and tell them I want to join the army. I don't want, to decline the status of yeshiva for that. And there was a nice guy there and told me, listen, if you need help and you want to work it out, there's a guy in Kiryat Arba. His name is Aaron Granot. And maybe give him a call. Let's see if it's going to work. That's the first time I heard about Osechayel. And I think a couple weeks later, I was trying to find myself. I don't have really where to sleep. It was really, really tough time. So I pick up the phone. I call Aaron Granot and I told him, listen, I don't have a place to be. I'm trying to figure out things around. Could I come to you? Can you find me a place or something? I was like in a really, really a bad place. And we were like, yeah, sure. Come tomorrow. It was Erev Pesach, like I think 5 years ago. And then I came there. And at the beginning, I was with a lot of people like me. They come from the same background and I found a family and support. The first time in many, many years, I understand and I feel like I'm not alone anymore. The struggle that I'm dealing with, it's okay, but I'm not alone. There's a lot of good people who want to help. They dedicated their life in order to help people like me.
When you joined the army, do you remember, were there cultural things that you did not yet understand? Did you grow up knowing about, Hatikva, Yom HaAtzmaut? I mean, a lot of these aren't really celebrated in the Haredi world, so I'm curious, what were the cultural hurdles that you had when you first joined the army?
I remember the first time, that was before I joined the army, I went with Aaron Granot to visit many soldiers in many places. I want to see the operation immigration. So we went to a place called Mikve Alon. This is a big place for people they want to go to make a degree after the army, so they get in a certain maths before they live in the army to recap their learning. And there was like 1,000 soldiers. It was Yom HaZikaron, Lechayalei Tzahal, to the IDF soldier that fell in the battle.
Memorial Day.
They were singing a beautiful song. It's called It's Over by Ilan Hamedi. A special soldiery got hurt in this operation right now, and that happened right now in Gaza. And I was crying. I was crying like a child. It was really touching me.
Wow. The song is called It's Over. It's in Hebrew, I assume?
Nigmar, it's in Hebrew, yeah. It's talking about how sometimes it seems so regular that I'm in the army and I kill people, but there's so many heroes in this country. There's so many bravery young people who sacrifice in their life for other people, for the good of their own.
Wow, that is really incredible. I want to talk a little bit about your relationship with your parents. You know, it sounds like there was a period where it was rock bottom. You were very distant, and I asked you, because the trajectory of the conversation is very different depending on how it ends, what your relationship is like with your parents now. And you told me, what did you tell me?
I will tell you that the relationship with my parents to now is incredible. It was never been that good. Not before I was the children. That is the best period of time that I'm in a relationship with my parents.
That is incredibly moving. Help me understand, how did it go from one extreme to the other?
So I want to give credit to Aaron Granot that one of his mission is trying that. It's really hard to bring the parents back together with relationship with the children. I can be honest, most of the time it's not working. It's really tough. But in my case, he convinced me to go sit up with my parents, sit up with my father and talk a little bit. And I will be honest, the first time was really bad. I was sitting with my father in a restaurant and I told him, listen up, I want to talk about what happened in the past and I want to figure the thing out. And look at me and says, hey, I'm sorry, I don't want to go in the past. I just want to talk about what's going to be in the future. And I was like, oh, not for me. I was like putting like the money and I said, I don't need you. I go out and in a storm and I was really angry.
So the first meetings did not work out well, did not end well.
No, absolutely not. But Aaron Granot was helping me out. He convinced me to do it again. And I went to meet my parents. I was write down the question I had in the past. And it was really tough to me. But I tried to figure out if I want to be in connection back with my parents. You know, I was really angry and I had many reasons to do so. It's all right. I have empathy for what I've been through. And we started talking. Then I come to visit like once in a couple months, once in a time. You know, we start having a phone call sometime before Shabbos and stuff like that. From my perspective, the time that things break down and become better is because I always try to understand what is my parents having problem with. Because it's not the religion part, because I came to the house, I was no longer religion anymore, and they didn't care. So I understand it can't be that what they have in problem in the past. So I try to understand what is the roots of what's going on. And I was remember we sitting all the family on the table, we have a dinner or something, and I would say, let's everyone says one thing about each other. Everybody gonna say one good thing about each other. And everybody started saying that. That was really nice. And I looked at my parents and I told them, listen up, despite everything, I think you are incredible and good parents. And they started crying. They started crying.
They started crying at the table when you looked at them and said, I want you to know, I think you are incredible, good parents. Were you telling the truth? Did you really feel that?
Yeah, because at that time, I think I started to have conversation with myself. I understand the anger and the revenge is not hurting them. It's hurting me. So why do I want that? I want to heal myself and move on. And I try to look back and what my parents did to me. And I see that, you know, they made mistake and that's okay. Everybody make mistake, but they always want the good for me. You know, sometimes people want to do good things and they turn out bad. That's okay. But they always care about me and they always want to do good for me. And I really said it from the heart. And I didn't understand that was the point. They was feeling that they were a bad parents. They feeling that they made a mistake and they blamed themselves. And when I ripped that gap, you got into a certain point and all the walls are breaking down.
The heavens open up, the gates open up, and a lave of Evan, a heart of stone, can turn into a heart of Basar very quickly. And I think you're 100% right. It's so easy for everyone to blame the other person and blame themselves. And so long as, you know, fingers are pointed at the other, it's hard to fill the space up in between us with real love and affection. And giving almost your parents permission to say you're good and you tried your best and we have different paths now is extraordinarily holy. I'm curious, how careful are you when you visit your house? Would you come home in uniform or you would always change back into a yeshiva bacher?
No, I could come home with the uniform on the army. Like I said, in that time, I started to understand they don't really care about if I'm religion or that. They quite, I actually, that I'm making something in my life and I'm doing something, they were happy for that.
Tell me, your relationship with your siblings, did that ever fray or that was always strong?
That's a little bit problematic. And also that was a little bit problem with my parents because when I started to reconnect to my family, I was really afraid that the only reason they're doing that is because they know I'm struggling with a lot of stuff. And I thought that maybe they want to convince me, let's figure this out, come back home, start being back religions. That's the point. I want you to be a religion back. And I was really, really afraid of that. And my older sister, she was always like talking to me like, put a kippah, and she called me and tell me, maybe you're gonna do a kiddush every Shabbat, every late Shabbat. So I told her, maybe you're gonna smoke a cigarette every late Shabbat. Like, what do you want from me? I believe. So I really, really test him. One step at a time. I try to do stuff and see what their response be. And I remember I was sitting them on Shabbos night, having a seudah. I wanted to smoke a cigarette. I went up on the roof. I smoked a cigarette. I came back. Like, nobody cares. Nobody say anything. Nobody talk anything. That's what I understand, that something is different. Something has really, really changed.
They're not trying to be makarev you to be frum again. They're trying to keep the family close so we could love each other and continue to love each other, which really is incredible and is an incredible turning point, really, in all of this. I'm curious if you have friends who are still in the Haredi yeshiva world, assuming that you do. Do they ever give you slack? Are you able to talk to them about your own experiences? Or do those friendships kind of disappear once you enter this very new world?
So I have a couple of funny stories about that. I remember like a month after I left the Haredi community, a good bachur, he called me and asked me, I heard you after there. Yeah. What's going on? Why are you not going and murdering people? Why are you not raping and stealing? And I was like, what? Like, what are you talking about? And why not? There is no God. You don't believe in anything. Why not going those things? So I tried to explain it. Like, first of all, I don't have a motive, but I have values. Like if I'm going in a certain way, it's like, it's not going on. So that was like a funny story for me. The second time we just coming for to Purim, one of Purim 3 years ago, a couple of my friends called me and they were crying and doing givald and how could it happen? You've been so Talmud Chacham, and the only reason I'm in this because you showed me the time of Limud Torah, so we cannot understand, and they were crying. And it's fine. And I get it. And then some of them I actually met, and we had a really, really nice conversation. My specific thing, and I really want people to hear that, no matter where I went, if I was on the street, if I was in a bad place, no matter what, I don't think there was one day that I never sit and learn a Gemara or something. And the reason for that is that I never see a person more happy as my father when he sit and learn. I never see someone more, it's like in heaven. So I always wanted to have that feeling. So I always sit and learn. So when I meet my Haredi friends, or when I'm coming back to home, it's like I can connect them based on that thing because I still sit and learn and I still love it. So we have some bonding on their language that we can connect.
That is extraordinarily heartening that you still can, talk and learning and feel connected to that because of the joy that your father embodied. There was a video that was circulating last year that was extraordinarily moving of you putting on tefillin, saying Shema Yisroel. I was wondering if you could recount the background to that story, because it did kind of go viral for a few moments, in that frum social media world on Twitter and WhatsApp. Can you retell and kind of give me a little bit of the background of that story? Because I did find it quite moving at the time.
Okay, so I have a really, really good friend from Lakewood. He's my father's best friend, and we also going to become a good friends. His name is Naftali. And he reached me out and tell me, like, he saw a video about a woman in Cleveland talking about the Rabbi and Mir. She told him that her son is put in film for the first time in 20 years in the family. And the rabbi from Mir, he told him back, listen, my son, don't put tefillin, I want a bracha. And she was really inspiration from that. And I know at the time that my father is in Cleveland for Shabbos. So I know it's my father. So he sent me that video, and I was with one of my roommates, and I says, do you have a tefillin? Do you still have your tefillin or something? He says, yeah. So I said, why not? Let's make a video back. Let's put tefillin. It was really moving me. Why not make someone feel good? Why not? And like you said, the story was exploded. But going back for you asked me about my Haredi friends. And after I put this video, I needed to explain a lot of people, because a lot of my friends that was after the Echo stuff was asking me, do you coming back? Like, what's going on? For my Haredi family, I just said, are you going back? You're starting to put a film like every day. So I really needed to navigate it.
Hold off. Don't get too excited, but it was a very moving moment. I think your motivation is even more moving, your own relationship to tefillin aside, but it's an easy way to bring a little bit of joy, a little bit of nachas to somebody. It brought a joy to everybody watching. And it also shows that the world and the childhood and the world that you emerge from does not hold pain over you. There are some people, because of the trauma that they have, that can't engage with anything at all. And it's a sense of healing and freedom that you have the ability to do a video like that to show, look, I'm not traumatized. I'm not scared from this. I could put it on and I don't need to always be running away from it. I was suspicious at the time too that was the background to it, but I saw something something almost even holier in a way, even higher, where I'm not saying that I returned, but I'm saying that the path and the notion of returning does not scare me. It doesn't bring me immediate pain that I have to always run in the opposite direction.
One of the things I find really, really fascinating is like a lot of liberal people, they accept anyone. But if someone want to put tefillin, if someone want to do something religion, they will go nuts. They will go absolutely nuts. I always asking myself, why? I gotta put it on the most way. It's something that you put like on your arm. It's just like, why are you such against? And I believe that the people who are against that are the most believer people, because if you don't believe it's something that connect to God and do something holy, why you gonna stand against it? So I think those people are hurting themselves and they're expressing this out. I really think that in this life you need to let everyone to live the life on the best way they can. And I honestly believe that if someone want to be a religion and if someone decided to do that and want to be in a relationship with God, that's amazing. Why not?
That is very powerful and a testament to, I think, your own capacity. One of the issues that we both know is in the center of the news right now, especially since October 7th, is the question of Haredim serving in the army. And I'm not reaching out to you, nor is the point of any of these interviews to have you or anybody else weigh in on what the policy of the state of Israel should be. Neither of us have a vote, neither of us serve in Knesset, neither of us are deciding. But I was wondering if you could weigh in a little bit more to provide guidance to families who have children, because you have seen the work of Osei Chayil, and not every story ends as sweetly and as uplifting as your story has ended. There are families and there are children who no longer have relationship with their parents. What advice would you give to parents and to children to ensure that this question and this divergence, this difference that is roiling the country does not also tear apart families? What advice would you give to children who are from Haredi homes who are now looking to join the army? And what advice would you give to parents who have children who are looking to join the army to ensure that the family unit, which I believe is the Kodesh HaKadoshim of religious life, it's the holiest unit of religious life, what advice would you give to each of those groups to ensure that the family unit stays together?
Okay, I'm going to sum it in one rule, responsibility, and explain what I'm saying. Now, I'm living in Israel, and it's a big debate whose responsibility and whatever. And I'm always saying to Haredi people who talk to me about it, could you agree with me that learning Torah is the most important thing that protects all Israel? And they say yes. So I ask them, don't you have a responsibility for what happened on October 7th? Like, if you're the one who's supposed to protect us, how could it happen? Did you not learn hard enough? My point is, you cannot eat a cake and, expect it to say, you must take responsibility. And the moment you understand you're taking responsibility and you're not thinking only about yourself, and you're thinking about the good of all, that's the main thing that you can work. Because for me, that's the feeling I feel, not just also in Israel, but the world himself is lacking. Everybody's thinking only about himself. We're not looking about nation. We're not looking about identity. And we need to bring that back. We need to bring people back to think, like the Zionism, to think about the good of everything, the ability to sacrifice for everybody else. In the army, they say, Yesh lama ein ech. If you have a reason, you don't have a question how. You have a reason, you're going to do it. So you can go back and forth and think and ask a lot of questions. It doesn't matter. If you have a reason, if you want to take responsibility, you can do it.
And address a little bit the children, because you mentioned some of your mistakes. There are people who, for all the right reasons, are joining the army, for all the right reasons, and ashrecha to them. But how do you do that without eroding the family unit? Are there mistakes that you could make? And you've already mentioned at least one. But what do you see are the common mistakes of your colleagues who come from Haredi homes? They join the army. What are the mistakes that the children make in their process of joining that they could avoid in order to keep their family intact?
Well, it's really, really tough question, because some of the time, when Israel is saying we're going to die and we're not going to join the army. Yeah, that's what I heard from a lot of people. So it's a big pressure on a lot of parents. Parents can tell you, my children want to go to the army. I support that, but I can't do it because of the community. So I think the most important thing is communication. Go and say, I want to go to the army. That's the most important thing to do. I'm going to do it no matter what. I don't care what you say. Sit down with your parents, try to have a conversation, try to communicate it as much, and try to understand what you're feeling, and to ask them, how can we work this out together? And I think that can solve a lot of problems.
One of the reasons why we're not being so forthcoming about your last name, it's not a state secret, but you said, I want it to be good for my parents. You're not looking to chas v'shalom, make anybody, God forbid, look bad. This is a very real story, and I'm wondering if we could end with something positive, almost that turning point that you had with your own parents. What is something that you maybe miss or think about from the world that you were brought up in, from your childhood home, maybe from your parents, your mother, your father? What is something you think about most that you missed from that world that you were brought up in?
And the answer is simple: community. The community and the Haredi family is everyone is taking care of everyone. It's really, really fun. You have a feeling that you're connected to something. And that's what I'm really trying to find it again. When people support like a basketball team, they want to find an identity. They want to find zehut meshutefet. They want to find connecting to other people. And the Haredi community, when you're inside. You're one of them. You can meet them all the place and you're one of them. And that's something I really, really miss.
That is incredible. Would you characterize the reactions and your relationship to your mother and father? Were they in lockstep with this, or was the healing and the journey for each of them different?
So it absolutely was different. In most family, one of the parents is much more dominant than the other. So in some parents, it can be the mother or the father. But for me, I find it much more easier at the beginning to talk to my mother. We were able to heal things much more easy. But with my father, it's take much more time. It's take a lot of work. And the best thing I want to tell to people out there and that listen out, maybe the parents, maybe the children, time gonna solve everything. Don't try to figure everything right now. One step at a time, one problem at a time. Give it the time. It's gonna work out.
Avi, I cannot thank you enough. I am so grateful for you, for your story, and for sharing it with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It was the delight. It was fantastic. And I hope people can find inspiration for my story and today life.
At the heart of the entire Pesach experience is a word that keeps on coming up in its association to Pesach, and that word is shmirah. Shmirah means to literally watch. When soldiers stay up at night, they are told that they are participating in shmirah. Perhaps you remember and went to a camp where at nighttime when you go and check in on all the bunks, that is called shmirah. Shmirah means to watch, and is a word that appears over and over again in the Torah's description and affiliations with Pesach itself. We are told that the month of Pesach, Chodesh HaAviv, Shmor es Chodesh HaAviv, watch and make sure that you stay steadfast over this month. That is an obligation to make sure that this month falls out in the springtime. And even more centrally as it relates to Pesach, not just the month of Pesach and the time period, the season of Pesach, but we are obviously told, Ushmartem es hamatzos, where the pasuk says you should watch over the matzah. In fact, the matzah that most eat at the Seder is called Shemura matzah, matzah that is watched over, cared for, and tended to. And I think that in the conclusion of this episode, it is worth thinking about how we watch over those who watch over us. The shmira, the watchfulness, that careful attentiveness and deep care that we show those who are caring for the Jewish people who are putting their lives at risk. And the prayer that we come back to over and over again. It is literally the song, the lyrics to the song that has been opening up every single 1840 episode since October 7th. And that is the words from the prayer that we say after the Amidah, after Shmona Esrei, the prayer of Shomer Yisroel, Shmor She'eris Yisrael, V'al Yovad Yisrael, Ha'omrim Shema Yisroel, where we speak out and beseech God to watch over the Jewish people, to watch over the remnant of the Jewish people, and that the Jewish people should not be lost, those who say Shema Yisroel. And this obviously is a prayer in reference to God as the Shomer Yisroel, but God has many representatives, and in this moment since October 7th, the representatives who bring the watchfulness of God into actuality in our world, who represent God in their watchfulness, is of course those who are serving to protect the Jewish people in the land of Israel, who are serving in the IDF. And I think that it is worth reflecting on how we, each of us, can be more watchful, more attentive for those who are watching over us. The Shmira of the Shmira, in a holiday, in a Yontif that celebrates Shmura Matzah, Shmartem es Chag HaMatzos, that celebrates being watchful, of being attentive, of being careful. to ensure that the way that we speak about one another, the way that we speak about our soldiers, the way that we speak about our own families is with a watchfulness, a strategic, caring, attentive, sensitive watchfulness. Almost the imagery that I have is my father lifting out the shmura matzahs from the box and making sure that, God forbid, but making sure none of them crack, that you don't break it in two accidentally, that they're whole so that you can use them at the Seder. It's with a certain care and delicateness that we treat the matzah. And that if this is in fact the yontif of shmira, the yontif of being delicate, of being careful, that we should be delicate towards one another and with one another, and that we should all merit that through our collective shmirah over one another and for one another, that the ultimate Shomer Yisroel, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God, should watch over and protect the Jewish people. So thank you so much for listening, and thank you again to our episode sponsors, our friends at Osei Chayil. Please visit their website, learn about their work, support their work. You could find out more at oseichayil.org. Again, that's Osei Chayil, OSEYCHAIL.org, oseichayil.org, doing incredible work serving soldiers from Haredi and Hasidic homes. We are so grateful for their partnership in putting together this episode. And thank you, of course, once again to our series sponsors, Danny and Sarla Turkel. I am so grateful for your friendship and sponsorship, all of your graciousness over all these years. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. This episode, like so many of our episodes, was edited by our dearest friend, Dina Emerson. If you enjoyed this episode or any of our episodes, please subscribe, rate, review, tell your friends about it. You can also donate at 1840.org/donate. It really helps us reach new listeners and continue putting out great content. You can also leave us a voicemail with feedback or questions that we may play on a future episode. That number is 516-519-3308. Once again, that number is 516-519-3308. If you'd like to learn more about this topic or some of the other great ones we've covered in the past, be sure to check out 1840.org. That's the number 18 followed by the word 40, FORTY.org. 1840.org, where you can also find videos, articles, recommended readings, and weekly emails. Thank you so much for listening, and stay curious, my friends.
אני יושב עכשיו קרוב אל השמיים, מנסה למצוא תשובות לשאלה, על הדרך גם חולץ את הנעליים, חיילים עכשיו עוזבים את המרכבה, כן אני יושב שם חושב, קצת עלייך להכאיב מעט ללב, את המשפט הבא את בטח מכירה, יום יומיים אני בא בחזרה, נגמר, נגמר, נגמר. ובדרך כשיצאנו אל הבית, אז יצאנו בפלאפל בפינה, ואנשים שם הסתכלו מחאו כפיים, הגיבורים שלנו אמרו באהבה, ואני עומד שם מסתתר, קצת גדול עליי להיות זה ששומר, ובין ביס לביס עולה בי מחשבה, לעזאזל כמה גיבורים יש במדינה, נגמר, 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 נגמר. ומאז אפשר למנות כמעט שנתיים, והיום אני עסוק בהשלמה, בעוד רגע כבר אשמע את הכפיים, ואז אצעק בכל כוחי מהבמה, ואם שומעים מקשיבים, עוד אפשר למצוא כאב בין המילים, ומבטיח לא אכתוב על זה יותר, רק בפעם הבאה ששבר. נגמר, 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 נגמר. יש מדינה אחת על יד ירושלים, שם עדיין משתוללת מלחמה, כי אנשים שם מאבדים את העיניים, לא מחכים לגיבורים באף פינה. נגמר, נגמר, נגמר.